It's 3 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Got a good attendance this afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Betty, would you please have roll call?
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Coons,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
I am present.
Mr. Jesse,
Here.
and Mr. Kimbrough.
Here. Thank you. I would like Mr. Williams to please open the meeting with a prayer.
Let us close our eyes for a moment of silence for Ukraine. Father God, we come once again to this place, this courthouse. Father, asking you to be with us, to strengthen us. Help us to be the one, all in one. Father, we pray for your goodness and we understand it. For the sun that shines today, Father, for us who have to make the decisions, for as well as the ones who come with different ideas. Father, help us to grow together, to learn together, be happy together. In Jesus' name, we all do pray. Amen.
Thank you. Please stand, and Matt, would you?
Yes. Would all citizens rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll begin by reviewing the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Coons. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, we have to do roll call, don't we? Roll call.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
oh, excuse me, Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion's approved. Next, we will have the public comment period. I will open the public comment period and to just give you some guidance, each speaker will give your name and address for the record. Each individual will be given one opportunity to speak. All comments will be addressed to the Board of Supervisors, not to the audience. And individual speakers may have up to 3 minutes. If you represent a group of 4 or more, let me know and I'll tell you what the rules are for that. Do we have anyone who would like to speak to the board today? Please come forward.
Good afternoon to the Board of Supervisors. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman and Speaker, can you turn that microphone on? So we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Louis Brace. I live at 1034 Haley's Road at Locust Hill. I have a concern about, this would be the second time I'm come in here and spoke on the Confederate monument. People, we will have to wake up. The only person that respond diligently and did his part on the board was John Kuntz. Thank you, John, for what you do. And also Robert Jackson. That monument is causing a lot of problems. It need to come down. It need to be moved. If they can move it in Richmond, you can move it here. It caused a whole lot of controversy. And I looked in the paper. And I come by here on Saturday. You guys know what's going on around here. The left done gone way out on the left. And if you think I'm lying, you look at the president tonight, see where they left at. See which one's gonna get up and applaud him. The Republican is gone. I don't know who representing them, but they are gone. It's no more Republican. There's no more. Trump destroyed it. Thank you. Okay, and when I looked at this paper, thank you for the good job you did, Larry. This is division right here. Confederate to the left. Black Lives Matter to the right. Middlesex County needs Black Lives Matter. Black helped form this county. It wasn't for the black, this county wouldn't be what it is now. It's too much rhetoric and it's too much hate. And I don't see a thing over here to the left saying, love thy neighbor. But when I look at the Black Lives Matter thing, it says, love thy neighbor. I done came in here and spoke to y'all about this one time. We all gotta get together and pray and love one another. Middlesex County don't have this no more. The Republican or whoever you represent, I'm saying the Republican, I'm gonna just come out and say what I have to say. Republican is too far to the left. If you think I'm lying, you look at the address the president gonna give tonight and you see who will get up and applaud him. I guarantee you, the Republican might not even show up. So people wake up. And for the supervisor, if y'all have your opinion, say, you got the last opinion, take it down. You voted right the first time, 3-2 to take it down. And then you had some people come in here and throw snowballs at you and y'all put it on a referendum, which it shouldn't have been put on it. And you know, when it comes down to the majority, you know which way it's going in this county.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Others who'd like to speak, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Lottie Roan, and I live at 348 Raven Road here in Saluda. My husband and I, James, have lived there for 24 years now. We are petitioning the county to take over the maintenance of Raven Road. Prior years, we maintained the road ourselves until my husband was diagnosed in 2019 with terminal brain cancer, stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer. The condition of the road is concerning on many levels, but my number one concern, of course, is that for fire, rescue, and ambulances, being able to get to my home or my neighbor's home in a timely fashion in the event of an emergency, which we did. Our neighbor's fence had caught on fire. The gentleman that purchased the property next door was doing some cleaning in the house and the fence caught on fire, and the fire and rescue did have a difficult time getting down our road. It was in horrible condition at that time. But you can see why that is a main concern for me in the event that I ever need to dial 911. I want to make sure that ambulance gets to my house or to my neighbor's home in the event of an emergency. We have volunteer firefighters that even live on our road, and they have expressed concern about trying to exit the road to go to a call, which is concerning because it was just in terrible condition. Our postal service is now, they've started service again, but it was ceased due to the road being impassable. So she had stopped all service to our roads. That's happened many times because, you know, due to the weather, we were unable to get the road up to par for her to get up and down the road. So, but, you know, for me, that's a big concern too about the mail is it's how we received his chemotherapy in the event that, you know, that he's on chemo again. That's how I get it, through the mail. So I want to make sure that there's never a lapse in the mail again. The entrance of our road, and VDOT is very well aware of we have a sinkhole. And my opinion that it's coming from the gravel road because it was sinking there at first, and now it's affected the hard surface road, which is Courthouse Road. And I want to say it's State Route 605, I believe. I believe that's the route number. But what I'm thinking is that the erosion underneath is happening where the piping is for the ditch, for where the water runs off, and it just runs off. It runs everywhere into the ditches, causes the holes to come back again. VDOT comes back out. They pour gravel into the hole. They come back the next day. They asphalt it, and then in another few months, we've got that sinkhole again. at the entrance of our road, which starts to affect the gravel road too, because that erodes too. But they're aware of the, when it rains, how bad it gets, and that the hole always comes back. The school bus does not come down our road, in which there is a cul-de-sac that she could turn around. Instead, she backs up into our road to turn around to go back out. She's wiped out our sign a couple of times. She even got hung up in the sinkhole at one time. There was a problem there. So safety for the kids is an issue with the bus. We would love for the bus to come down our road. We now have younger children living on our road. So we do have, several neighbors that have children. It'd be nice if the bus could come down to the cul-de-sac and take care of the kids. But as taxpayers here in Middlesex County, I just feel that it's time to take the burden off of the homeowners for the road. And we do have an estimate for us to have the road brought up to code, bring a
I'm
milling
sorry.
in.
Sorry, Ms. Run, your time is up.
One time, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Could we get the estimate?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Anyone else? Care to make public comment? Any other public comment? All right, I'll close the public comment period. Next on the agenda is the report from constitutional officers, which the agenda says is report only, but I believe we have somebody from the Treasury Department would like to address us. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tracy Wright, Deputy Treasurer. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Treasurer Kathy Thrift, as she had a previously scheduled appointment and not able to attend this meeting. Our concern is about a topic that will be discussed later this meeting about payroll processing and the possibility of outsourcing it. We strongly recommend this topic be thoroughly discussed and thought out before the decision is made. Outsourcing payroll will generate extra work that will need to be entered into the general ledger of the county's accounting system. Kathy spoke with several localities and asked if payroll was an internal control or outsourced. All but one stated payroll was done in-house by a paid employee that handled all PR-related issues. She asked for each opinion based on being treasurers and was told that outsourcing had been looked at and not considered due to tremendous amounts of work that was created for the treasurer's office. Currently, when payroll is executed through the Bright system, all entries hit specific lines within the general ledger based on how each employee is set up within. If payroll is executed outside of the Bright accounting system, all entries will be made manually. The extra amount of internal bookkeeping can be time consuming and labor intensive. If journal entries will be entered, there's room for human error. We also took it upon ourselves to contact Paul Lee of Robertson Farmers and Cox to discuss, and he advised that he only had one locality that outsourced payroll. Everybody else was internal. The county treasurer's office has 2 staff members, including myself, that do all journal entries and monthly balancing. If payroll is outsourced, it may be seamless for employees, but there will be a detailed internal process that needs to be put in place. And who will oversee all the entries to the general ledger, who will monitor the input, who will handle the retirement and the other deductions in the input, who will post all the journal entries. Please don't take this as coming across as negative. It's just a decision that can impact the treasurer's office and the staff and whether it could work smoothly or not. And that's all.
If I, just a question,
Mhm.
the journal entries would they require calculations, or is it a matter of taking the reports from an outsourced payroll report and just entering them? You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there,
It would all depend on who we went with and whether or not Bright has worked with them before, as to whether it would have to be manual journal entries or something that could be imported in.
And actually, we did discuss this with both Bright and Dominion, and it's a CSV file that is imported. So really, the data entry comes straight off one system and it's imported into the Bright system. So there is no manual data entry except for pressing the button to import it. So we did check on that because we were concerned as well.
Thank you. The Commissioner of the Revenue Report is report only. And so moving right along to agency and staff reports, VDOT is report only.
Mr. Chairman, we have a leave at night with VDOT here today.
We've got a,
I mean, I don't have to speak if you don't want me to.
I think he'd rather come to our meetings than Gloucester, so we take that as a compliment.
No, I do like Middlesex. Yeah, I just wanted to come by and give a really quick update in terms of VDOT. I'll be back here in the spring, probably April sometime. I'll be working with Matt to nail that date down for a secondary 6-year plan. But I did want to just give a really quick update with a few things going on in Middlesex right now and hopefully answer some questions.
I don't know you, so would you give me your name?
Sure.
please?
My name is Lee McKnight. I'm the residency administrator for Saluda Residency.
Thanks, Lee.
Yes, sir. Construction, we're about to kick off our paving season, so you should start seeing a lot of paving on primary routes 33 and 3, various locations on those routes. We were scheduled to give an update on the Deltaville Shared Use Path project. Unfortunately, digging into that project, there's been some relatively complex and right-of-way and utility issues. We've discussed this with county staff and to try to find options and potential paths forwards to try to accommodate those issues and get this project going and built. We hopefully will have the scoping completed by June, and then we will present those findings to the board at that time. In terms of maintenance, we're coming out of snow season, hallelujah. I am very, very happy that that's ending here. We had 10 total snow events this year in the Saluda residency. I think we did a pretty good job personally, all things considered. Hopefully that's 10 total and no more. I really don't want any more snow events in March or April, heaven forbid. We're beginning to work our routine maintenance plans ahead of the paving schedules. This is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. So we're going to be identifying these locations that we're going to be paving this year, going out in front of the paving train, pulling shoulders, digging ditches, cleaning out pipes, inspecting pipes, ensuring that the pipes aren't failing or they're draining properly. I think that's really important so that when we pave that road, there's a fresh mat of asphalt and all the drainage facilities are working appropriately. There's no standing water because water is the enemy on a road. So that's something that we're really focusing on this year. And you might have already seen some of our maintenance crews on 17. I think I saw them yesterday in the median just north of Big John's cleaning out ditches. So that work has begun and we'll start pulling shoulders on 17 here very shortly. We're going to begin on the primaries first and then move to the secondaries after those are complete. I wanted to hit on, I know the supervisors have been asking about Raven Road and I just heard some comments about that. Really with that road, there are two options in terms of street acceptance through the state system. And this might be more beneficial to have a work session to determine which course the county would like to pursue. But just very, very briefly, just to go over these two options. One is through the secondary street acceptance requirements, the SSAR, which essentially the citizens would have to bring the road up to current state standards using private funds, and then the road would be taken into the state system. There's some details in there, obviously. That's a very simplistic way to put it. The second option is the rural addition program, which would be prioritized by the county, the Board of Supervisors, through the secondary 6-year plan. There's a myriad of requirements, like a minimum of 40 feet of right-of-way dedicated, Utilities would have to be moved outside of the right of way, can encumber the roadway. And then there's some very intricate things like 5% of construction funds through the secondary 6-year plan cannot be spent on rural additions, or more than 5% of construction funds. And you can't add more than 1.25% of the county's secondary mileage through the rural addition program. So there's some very intricate details that we probably need to work out if that's the board's wish to pursue.
And Lee, real quickly, that was going to be my recommendation, that we try to meet with the neighborhood folks, privately discuss and have VDOT down there, take a
Sure.
look at the road to see what we're looking at.
Sure.
I'm somewhat familiar with that program, and I understand we have some funds in it, but they're very limited.
Correct. Yeah, I think there's about, and don't quote me on this,
Right.
Matt, and we'll talk about this
Right.
at our meeting, but I think it's about 300,000. So again, you can't spend more than 5% of that, what's currently in that fund on a
Right.
rural addition road.
Well, thanks, Lee.
Yes, sir. And that's all that I had for an update, but I'll be glad to take any questions.
Yeah, I got a question for you. In some information that I've seen, and you talked about the 40-foot right-of-way. There's no in-between between a 40-foot right-of-way and an easement?
Meaning for the road itself, so
Yeah.
the minimum that can be accepted is 30 feet right away.
Okay,
But 40 feet, and that would have to be a very extenuating circumstance. Now, there are some situations where if you have a drainage easement might be appropriate instead of right away, but in general, a minimum of 40 feet, and that's kind of the standard throughout the road, would need to be dedicated. And we can look at specific details if there's somewhere that we need to adjust that, but that is the minimum, is 40 feet. And we can adjust that down a little bit to 30, depending on the situation.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the report, Lee, and thanks for coming in. We've been looking forward to seeing you. We had talked a couple months back, Reggie and I in particular, with Regent Road sort of being the dividing line between our two districts. Speaking only for myself and my constituents, we still are concerned with the speed on that road.
Okay.
We've obviously had incidents. I don't see it mentioned here, so I'm assuming there's nothing further being done about that, or is that the wrong assumption?
Well, I mean, at this time, and I just rode this road, I think it was 2 days ago, actually, personally, just to check on it. I was curious. The speed limits, the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit signs have not been installed yet. I asked the sign shop, and they are fabricating them. They're having issues, as everyone else is, with supply. But those speed limit signs are expected to be installed in the next 2 weeks. So that work will begin. But yet, in terms of the study is complete. It's been signed and sealed. It's official. So yes, in terms of what VDOT is doing, I think we've completed.
So just to be clear, I think I understood that the VDOT study yielded a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, and those wheels are turning, and but for the global supply issues, you'd probably have those signs up. I think what my constituents are telling me is 55 is still too fast. We don't
Okay.
care what VDOT says. And of course, they don't speak with one voice. They never do.
Sure.
But when we've had fatalities and injuries, it becomes more urgent.
Sure.
And so I guess I'm still trying to understand, if I'm not happy with 55, if my constituents aren't happy with 55, we don't want to get pitchforks and torches out. But what are our recourses? What if we just patently disagree with your expertise telling us about our local road? We know our road, and what my people are saying, and Reggie might want to echo this. We think 55 is still too fast, no matter what
Okay.
your studies say.
So I'm glad you asked that. And understanding speed limits in the Commonwealth is important. So the Code of Virginia states it grants the authority to the Commissioner of Highways to adjust or set speed limits on state maintained roads. It also grants the authority to localities who maintain their own roads the authority to set or adjust speed limits on those roads. After, and this is very, very important, this is in the Code of Virginia, after a traffic engineering investigation has been completed. It has to be done per code. If you were to set a speed limit arbitrarily without supporting data or fly in the face of the supporting data, it'd be an unlawful speed limit. It would not be legally enforceable. So it's very, very important that through the code, I mean, it's a legal thing. You have to do an engineering study that's completed, and that data, what comes out of that study, that's how the speed limits are determined. So it's really a legality thing. If you were to just go out to Regent Road and arbitrarily set a speed limit at 45, it would not be legally enforceable. It'd be an unlawful speed limit.
Unlawful gets interesting to me.
Okay.
Because that's more like you just trying to prolong something you need to do. On Regency Road, number of individuals that came forth and said that they had, accidents and stuff that, have not got reported. So we know accidents and stuff like that is big time data, and you can shift stuff around. Well, on Regency Road, and I think maybe you are the other one, you say, well, something have to happen. Well, something did happen. It was a school bus crossing the road on Regency Road that was hit in the back end. The bus is about 55 to 60 feet. If the speed limit was 45 miles an hour and they had applied brakes, it would never hit the bus. So now that's an incident that overrules what we talking about by law. That's one thing. And we got to look at that because 60 kids could have been on that bus in this particular road that we've been telling y'all for a year. Just imagine, we done came here and told the state of Virginia, look, we want the speed limit at least lowered back to 45 miles an hour. The state of Virginia is not going to do anything. Well, imagine the kid on the bus was yours and got hurt. Just imagine that, then what would you do? So I understand somewhat of legality, or you call it something like that, but I'm saying, you all said something had to happen. Something did happen.
Sure.
Okay, now we're saying that we got to wait. Now we got to study the state of Virginia or whatever they call it. If you go right over West Point, they got a 40-mile speed limit passing Whitmore going all the way back to the other road. You can go down Halers Road. We got a 40-mile speed limit. These things are here. And, as our representative, sometimes you got to get off comfort ground. Sometimes you got to push against the odds and do what you can do because somebody got to be above you. And we feel, as a county to go up and down that road is, hey, we looking at you. We want to see you for 2 months.
Sure.
See, that's not the only thing that I want to talk about being just Regency Road. A bus did get hit, okay? Back in, possibly hold 60 kids, didn't nobody get hurt, okay? We got that. We know that's enough to change the speed limit back. Now, the other thing we've been talking about, we had a patrons list, a list of bikers and walkers up and down 33. And we asked you all, could y'all put an extra white line on the outside? Maybe some signs said bikers and walkers to make awareness of people that's traveling through this county. Because the ones that's travel through this county, know we got a gentleman riding a wheelchair right on the side of the road. See, we know this, but you all don't know that. So we asked for awareness of something like this. But nothing happened. I haven't seen the line yet, and every day I go home. My wife see we haven't done nothing yet. Then I see different ones that bike and ride on that road, from judges to everything else. They walk out on 33. I see y'all white lining down the road the other day, and I swear, shoot me, that truck they got, all they do is put a white line, put some signs up, and tell people, ask them to slow down, because these things are happening. But you all said something had to happen. Well, something did happen. A guy got killed right down that road, no awareness. So 2 things have happened, y'all done nothing. The school bus, the gentleman got killed. Now, I don't know what else needs to happen before they put us in a rural setting. If you put us in a rural setting, need to do what we need to do, then we should have a choice in what goes on in our county. And I understand, but you can have work harder.
Sure.
You just got to work harder. We talk about Ravens Road. I know people that stay down the road. The road is in bad shape. They got a cemetery down the end of the road, but ones don't know. I guess a lot of people down the road stay in that cemetery. Maybe somebody ought to look up who is in that cemetery, and maybe they would help out. And I know it's not the norm because you're talking about going against a private road. Well, what I'm going to say here is that, these developments that they put in, well, at one time they charge that into the price of the house. Then you got the landowner, which will sell you a lot, throw it in and don't have enough money to do the road. So people that have a lower income will go in and buy these places put in, and they can't afford to have the road, but the landowner, whoever it was, sold it to them, and they don't have it. Now, we see that through the whole thing. Now we ask, can you help? And you say, well, with technicality, it's a private road. I know that's very,
Yeah.
that's very, but you add the incomes up with some of these private roads, you can decide who pay down that private road, who don't need to pay. It's simple ways. The number would give you what you need to do. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
Well, awareness, wait a minute, awareness, 33, and you can get with us and we can get the bikers and all that, get up and ride them down the road and walk. Even a judge used to be, I get him up there to speak to you, I know him. Okay. And Ravens Road, we wanted 45 miles an hour. You take it back and say 45 miles an hour. I don't care how you do it, but we have somebody left here that went up there in Northern Virginia somewhere. Well, look, we got a different bunch of, it's a different set of people now.
Sure. And speaking of Regents Road, the speed limit, I cannot do anything unethical and I cannot do anything unlawful. I just won't do that. I won't break the law. And right now, as the law stands, I cannot arbitrarily set a speed limit. That being said, I'll say this right now, the best way to control speed, hands down, and you mentioned West Point and it's Emporia as a good example, enforcement is the best option for speed control. So I will say, as part of this study, it revealed that there is a speeding issue on certain stretches of Regent Road. Putting a sign, lowering it to 45 miles per hour, if they're already traveling 72, is not going to reduce their speeds. Enforcement of the speed limit will. That will reduce, that'll force them to reduce their speeds. So I would first recommend that. Enforcement of the speed limit out there. Once we do that, I have no problem going back. I'll work for you, Mr. Williams. I promise. I'll do whatever I need to do.
But what I'm saying is speed limit need to be lowered back. And you said you would work for me or would work for us if you go back. I'm gonna ask you what we do. We want to think 45. Now, what we want is you think of a way. We think of a way that we can do it. You can implement it. You say, well, we can use law enforcement. Well, we got a lot of law enforcement on the road now. If they ride around, that will be a help, but that can't be exactly everything that we got to wait on because we're going to be waiting again to something happen. That's what's going to happen. We're going to be waiting again to something happen and we're not asking for much.
I understand it. And right now, based on this study, the speed limit is 55 miles per hour based on this engineering study. Enforcement of that current speed limit, and then we can come look at it. I promise you, we can look at it again if the speeds start coming down, if there's something else that changes that would trigger an additional speed study, and then we can reduce it from there. But as of right now,
that you said, that whoever said sitting there said something had to happen. I'm telling you, something did happen. Now you're saying, well, we got to go back and study again. How many times do we need to study something even though?
Well, right now, there's no need for an additional study until something, enforcement or something like that happens and brings those average 85th percentile speeds down.
Lee, does VDOT have a standard for enforcement? How much is enforcement is adequate?
Enforcement is up to the locality.
Right, but you just told us we need to go look at enforcement, right?
Sure.
So how much is enough enforcement before we say we've done what we can on enforcement, we're back to you? Because I'll go to the sheriff and I'll say, go stand on that road for 6 months. And then when we don't have a different result, does VDOT have something to tell us then? Or are you sure that the enforcement's the problem?
I think enforcement can help the problem. And that's what studies have shown nationwide. In terms of what I can do, I can only go off of what the data shows.
Understood.
It's a data-driven process.
Lee, I understand you have a study and you have a process, et cetera. What I'm trying to understand is if we've run the course on what you can do, what you're in your VDOT world, and you're saying we've done the study, you got some speeders, but it's not enough that lowering, like our engineering calculations spit out no change. Got it. But what you're saying on the public record here is what you can do is enforce more closely.
Yes.
Okay, but VDOT doesn't go so far. If I'm understanding correctly, VDOT doesn't say you need one person there for the sheriff's department for 6 hours a day. You don't have that, right?
The department is not an enforcement agency. So that is not our expertise.
I understand that. We're small government still down here, right? And so we don't just look to other agencies and then wash our hands.
Right.
We all work together as a community. We're still small government. So if you're going to say that enforcement is the solution, you are in the enforcement business. If that's in your toolbox and you say that we cannot lower it, we've done our study, and so now it's enforcement, what I'm saying is, okay, let me go to my enforcement person
Mhm.
and let me tell them how much more enforcement is adequate, because VDOT's saying they can do nothing for me right now. They've done everything they can. Remember, Reggie and I are just trying to respond to our constituents,
Sure, I
right?
understand.
And you're just trying to do your job. And right now you're at an impasse. You can't change the speed unless the engineering report says you can change the speed. And so you're saying, what can, you're trying to give us answers, but maybe try better enforcement. I think we're willing to try that. I'm willing to call the sheriff after this meeting and say, what would it take for you to put a concerted effort to show the community that we are going to be enforcing this more? Because this road in particular, it's a unique thing in Middlesex to some extent. I'm sure it happens in other communities, but that is a cut through. And it gets more traffic than it was ever designed for.
Mhm.
And over time, that's only gotten worse. And we're starting to see things that are not within my constituents or Reggie's constituents' comfort level. And so we're exhausting what we can do with VDOT. Then I think we'll exhaust with enforcement what they can do. But I am forecasting that there is at least a percentage chance or probability that enforcement comes and says, yeah, we added enforcement. Yeah, we got 3 more arrests.
Mhm.
And we're both exposed now to a public that might experience another, God forbid, fatality or an incident. And you're saying you've done everything you can. My sheriff will then be saying he's done everything he can and we'll be back here. I'm not saying that's what will happen, but that's
Sure.
a possibility, right? And so what I'm saying is, are you prepared if we go and demonstrate to you that we've done more enforcement? Is there somewhere in your engineering calculation that inputs, wow, this is a community that is really trying to change things from an enforcement standpoint and still they're having issues? Is there somewhere in the engineering calculation that questions the extent to which it's being enforced?
Sure. There's not an official engineering calculation, but if we get to that point, we can have some discussions and see what can be done. And I have no problem riding this route with you, Mr. Koontz or Mr. Williams personally. If you'd like to ride, I'll hop in the state vehicle and we'll go out there and ride it. And maybe there is something that I'm missing. Maybe there's something that the engineers are missing that we can look at, and it would change the outcomes of this study. But as the study was done, and it was done on almost 20,000 vehicles, it's a large sample size. It does not recommend a reduction in the speed limit from 55.
Understood. And that study is roughly 100 pages, 200 pages? Do you have
Oh,
any
no,
sense?
Yeah.
And do we have that, Matt?
I can get it to
haven't
you.
studied it. Could you provide that to
Sure.
the administration? I'd like to review that. And
Sure.
what I'd like to preempt is if the sheriff comes back and says, John, I really don't have the deputies to do this. I don't hear a cry from everybody else that you say you're hearing. Whatever he tells me and I can't get the enforcement, then I'm going to have to fight harder with the sheriff to get that enforcement. But my intent is to work with Reggie and others to get more enforcement so that we can go back to VDOT and say, fine, you threw it back at us. We threw everything we had at it. But I think what we will find is we can demonstrate more enforcement, but I don't want to come back to the same engineers and have them tell me that changes nothing, right? Like if I go to the trouble of, because I don't get to ask the sheriff for anything I want anytime I want. I only
Sure.
get so many asks. And I'm willing to go ask this one. But I want to know that if he adds that, we don't have a lot of enforcement resource, right? Like we're taking that from somewhere. That is a zero-sum game.
Mhm.
So if I make that ask of the sheriff and he comes through and we show no change to what is a condition that we're concerned about, then I want to be ready to come back to you and your engineers. I want to study the report and I want to make sure that there's an input for, is the county doing its job on enforcement? No. Okay, now is the county doing it? And if I get the same result after I've made that ask of the sheriff, I'm going to really have a problem. And I'm not meaning that in a threatening tone
No.
or anything. I'm just saying that leaves me with, I understand you can only do so much. But if we do more on our end, and then you're still telling me you can only do so much, where do I go?
Right. I
And
understand.
where do the constituents go? They come to me right now and Reggie and others, and we're coming to you and you're saying, I've done everything I can and pushing me to enforcement. But once I go to enforcement and that doesn't work, I will be back.
Sure.
Okay.
No problem.
Let me piggyback on that just a second. If the enforcement is done or pushed by the county, the report that you're citing, did that have any consideration of number of tickets that were written on the road and or accidents?
Right. It does take accidents, crash history, roadside development, speeds, that sort of thing into account. It does not look into the number of tickets that have been written or that sort of thing.
Well, my point being, to piggyback on John, is if there's a significant amount of tickets written on
Sure.
that road because of speed, I would think that y'all would want to look at that. And that'd be some consideration between the board and you guys on, what necessarily needs to be done to correct that,
Sure.
correct?
Yeah, and if that happens, we can take a look at that at that time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then just on Raven Road, not in my district, but I think what I heard in the public comment was some concern that Courthouse Drive is maybe impacting the entrance to Raven Road. So while I understand the lengthy processes by which we bring new roads in, and that happens once every blue moon, maybe every third blue moon, it just doesn't happen very often. So we don't have an answer for that constituent. That's good. Yeah, if you've got $100,000, we can pave your road and you can hand it to VDOT. Those constituents probably don't have that money laying around. That's not going to happen, is my guess. It's happened on Wilton Creek for me in Hartfield. I've been down this road, no pun intended. But my point is, if there is an allegation that somehow the maintenance on the existing VDOT road is creating a pothole at the turning point into Raven Road, whatever it is, can you at least ask your inspector, whoever it is that looks at these things, look at this with a critical eye, is at least how we turn into that road not being adversely impacted by VDOT's operation, because that can happen from road to road, as you know.
Absolutely.
And that is, as I recall, I believe that's a gravel road. Raven Road that's a gravel road. And so when you have runoff from, a hard road and you have significant traffic, because that's a pretty full neighborhood over there. If VDOT has anything they can do there other than say, for $100,000 or whatever, you guys can basically make a road and hand it over to us and we'll maintain it. I just ask that you have your inspector take a look at where that is. And if there's anything that we're doing wrong on the Courthouse Drive portion, that we can at least alleviate that incursion if it exists. I'd like a report that just says, hey, we did go look at that. And no, that's their road is in bad shape and that's their road. Or there is something we can do there to be better neighbors, so to speak.
I absolutely, I can do that. That's no problem at all.
And then finally, and I'm sorry, great job this winter. There is a lot that VDOT does well, and we're very appreciative. And it is just one more government service paid by tax dollars that does amazing things for all of us. So please don't take this as me just riding you. It's not that at all. We're riding your roads and we're critical, but when safety gets involved, that does get our attention.
As you should be.
We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to say, appreciate what you do also, but I would also hope that we spend a little bit more time on study less and do more, because right now we spend enough money to study to do stuff. And we take and play with the numbers right now to do something like that. If we study it 3 or 4 times, we'll just do the math on the thing sometimes. Sometimes the study costs more than what they do the project. You end up have to do the project anyway. I told a lady in the bank one time, if you're gonna do that, I said, well, we just don't need you here. You put all the information in a robot and let the robot shove the page out to you, you read it. So I just like to see more things getting done. I know y'all got to do studies to try to justify, but we got to look at the cost of studies versus the project that need to be done.
Sure. Good point. That's a great point. And I want to extend it again, and I'll work through Matt, Mr. Kuntz, and Mr. Williams would be happy to drive Regent Road with y'all, or meet out on site, whatever we need to do. Seriously, no problem doing that, and we can ride it and discuss any options that we may have. Maybe I'm not seeing something, maybe the engineers are not seeing something on that road, and I'd like to know about it. I think that's part of having a local partner, Because you, like you said, you guys drive these roads every day. You know all the nooks and crannies and the curves. So I would really appreciate that if possible. Any other question?
You know what, since we do have you, I will
Yeah.
bring this up. I can't help but notice on social media among constituents throughout the region, not just Middlesex,
Mhm.
The aging bridge that's crossing the Rappahannock River. I know this is the elephant in the room, but the arguments that constituents are making, and I know we're very low level here, and I know this goes all the way up to the federal government. We need champions for that bridge.
You have them.
We do,
Yes,
but
sir.
we obviously need more, or we would already have a new bridge, right?
Yes, sir.
So what I'm asking is on this report that you bring monthly, I'd like to know the status of the Norris Bridge. And if it's 20 years out, I want you to say it. And I want you to have to say it every month. And I want you to feel the same discomfort that I feel when I talk to my residents who are afraid, literally afraid to cross that bridge.
You mean replacement of the Norris Bridge?
Replacement, repair, whatever it takes to get us a state of the art amongst a massive infrastructure bill on the federal level that is going to flow through state dollars. There's money that's being allocated to these projects, and I don't have any good answers for my citizens right now.
Okay.
And what department you're not going to send me to enforcement on the Norris Bridge?
No, that's VDOT. So, yeah, there are, and I don't have that in front of me, but
No, of course not.
there are a lot of different projects for repair on the Norris. I know that there is discussion about replacement, but as you indicate, I don't know how
But let's-
far out.
Lee, let's
that
make that
is.
our problem.
Sure.
Let's not pretend that's above our pay grade.
Sure.
Because part of our pay grade is putting it on the report that we know there's a problem. And if it takes us years of documentation to say, we know there's a speeding problem on Regent Road, we know there's a safety problem crossing the Rappahannock, you and I are doing everything we can, and we can at least look our neighbors at Food Lion in the eye and say, "Yeah, it's over me, but I'm trying."
Yeah.
So at least show on this report that we have an issue there. Why wouldn't we? Do we not have an issue with that bridge?
Well, that bridge is not, I mean, it's rated as a 5, which it means it's not structurally deficient. So it's technically not in the SD category. It's safe to cross. There are multiple projects, and again, I'll add that to the board report from here on out. That's a great point. That are addressing some of the, we've painted the bridge. They've redone the deck in certain stretches of it. There's some pier caps and pier jackets that I think are going to be repaired here soon, but I will get those specifics and put in the board.
Yeah, and
report.
again, Liam, I wasn't expecting you
Yep.
to be like, "Hey, everybody, we're getting a new bridge next week."
I wish.
But at the same time, if I'm learning anything in small government, is we only have but so much of a voice, but we have to use it.
Sure.
And if that means me yelling into an echo chamber, count me in line, and hopefully more will join me. I can tell you the constituents are out ahead of us on this one. They know that bridge is unsafe. And unsafe, I know we have definitions that engineers use, but I have the definitions that the constituents use, and it's unsafe.
Okay.
Lee, just a comment about that. I called Delegate Hodges before the current legislative session and asked him about making sure that Norris Bridge replacement was highest on the priority list with the federal infrastructure funding. And he informed me that it already is in the form of the Norris Bridge Act or the Norris Bridge Bill. It is the headline of a structure that needs to be replaced with federal infrastructure money. So perhaps you can get the updates from him
Sure.
as to how that bill is progressing and what the probability is that we can get that.
And thank you for mentioning that there is a special structures fund, and it's called the Robert O. Norris Special Structure Fund. So it's literally named after the bridge. That's allocating funds to special structures across the Commonwealth, with the Norris being one of those that is getting funds for repair. In terms of replacement, that's a whole nother thing, but I'll absolutely speak with Mr. Delegate Hodges about that and some other folks. I know it's being discussed. I just don't know timeframes, or it's going to be, I've heard estimates of upwards of $400 million and that sort of thing for full replacement. So there's a lot to be determined in that regard.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Very robust report.
Yeah, I was
for a report only.
gonna-
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Lee.
Thank you all.
Oh, next on the agenda is Dr. Seitz for a school update. Good to have you here.
Thank you, thank you. And I have no report in there, no appropriations requests, no budget transfer requests. So hopefully, I think I'm bringing some good news to things. First, though, I did want to give you an update on where we are with the high school renovation project, just the plan and proposals that are coming forward. We have a community stakeholders meeting set for March 15th, 6 o'clock, and we do want to include 2 Board of Supervisors members. So if you haven't discussed who that would be yet,
You may raise your hands.
Mr. Coontz, Mr. Williams, perfect. I will have your names down. 6 o'clock. Middlesex
We're
High
actually a
School.
lot more gentle when it's not VDOT.
I was going to say, can I request
Careful
that
with that.
I come ahead of VDOT for these meetings? Or maybe he gets to take the beating and then I just get to slide in. So, all right, perfect. Thank you for letting me know that. The other 2 things are, wanted to let you know, because I talked about this when I gave my budget presentation. We were trying to get 2 things removed from the CIP to get ESSER funds to cover those, and we have been successful in that. We've gotten that grant amended. So we will be removing the paving projects at the schools and the overflow parking lot at the elementary school. ESSER funds will take care of that, and we'll begin our work with Bay Design. So about $565,000 comes off of our CIP request for that. And then last, and I'm certainly happy to stay and answer questions, we have a check for you, which Ms. Murray can deliver. And that we know exactly where the checks go. But that does come back to Middlesex County. I think I had shared also in the budget presentation, and you are aware anyway, and that it's just we were able to take advantage of a grant opportunity through the state, through ESSER funds. It was a little bit different. It wasn't an ESSER one, but it was for air quality. And that even though we had already signed off and received the funds to replace the systems at the elementary school, we fell in a timeline that allow us to apply for the specific amount. The state told us how much we could apply for, which was just over $216,000. We did, and we have just gotten that money sent to us through the state, so we're able to return it to the county. So a little bit of a payback on the HVAC system that was completed at the elementary school. That's all the good news I have for today, which I thought was good news, but happy to answer any questions you all may have, as long as I don't have to stand here as long as VDOT did and go through some of that.
I think you went back to the Gloucester meeting.
I can't blame you.
Just real quick, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't say this often, but your name came up a couple of times. Both of your names came up a couple of times in this morning's budget meeting. And y'all have done, I think, a very good job
Thank you.
with the grants that you brought in on the capital improvements. You're really leveraging a lot of state monies to let us do more. And I, for one, really appreciate that. I want to just say what an outstanding job you did with that. So thank you.
Thank you. I think sometimes in my office, especially Karen will cringe when I see a memo come across. I said this last night when I said, hey, there's a grant, we should apply for it. And sometimes I say, I don't know what we're going to do with it yet, but we're going to apply for it. So it has actually been a team putting some of these grants together. So we're happy to be able to take advantage of them.
So I would echo the county administrator on that. I have 2 things, and one is going to catch you off guard, and I don't expect you to have an answer, so don't try to if you don't want to. But one of the capital improvements that we looked at was MCPS LED lighting, $250,000. And the way it shows up in our budget discussions, it's sort of like one more expense. If at some point you could get with Dustin or whoever else and just provide us the calculations I'm sure you've seen on what the payback for such a system is, because it's a huge number. $250,000 to a constituent is a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But those projects historically, there's a really big upside to them because you're spending money on lighting already and you're spending on heating and air conditioning already. And there is a payback there. So if you could just get whatever they sent you when you made the decision that said, here's how quickly this pays for itself, here's what it improves. I'd like to have that in my back pocket when anybody asks me, what are the schools spending money on? It's really keeping the lights on and doing so with state-of-the-art technology. I think it's an easy story to tell, but the way it shows up in our budget package, it's just another $250,000. So,
Oh, sure.
and then The other comment in line with the county administrator that I have is, I obviously, to many of you know, I have the luxury of 4 kids in the 3 schools here. And so I experience the day-to-day communications that this school puts out to parents and stakeholders. And I don't want to be the first person to say we're through COVID. I don't think we're there yet. But, you know, I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, we've taken the mask debate out of the equation. And you know, people have been able to put down their forks and torches, and so the kids are mask free if they want to. And now the teachers and staff are mask free. But to me, what that really says more than that's kind of behind us to the extent that it ever will be, it speaks to how Middlesex County Public Schools navigated that. And we saw in the news around the country, a lot of school boards and a lot of school administrations. Not to say you didn't go through hell, I'm sure you did, but for this parent and this supervisor, thank you for what you guys have done these last 2 years. And I hope that as you approach graduation and summer and thinking about next year and, you know, the next 100-year run we have between pandemics, you're also thinking about anything we can do as a community to show appreciation for our teachers, and not just our teachers. There's more to a school system than teachers, as you both know. But it's really time for us as a community to come out from this pandemic and in a new way, support each other, and not just teachers and not just schools, but all of our first responders, everybody that got us to where we are today. We are so blessed as a community, I feel, to have people like you taking care of these things. In this case, our children. While the rest of us are panicking and biting our nails and trying to figure out mask, no mask, all of these things, you had to be professionals. You had to handle all of the day-to-day operations. And we see across the country among our teachers, there's burnout. Among our first responders, there's burnout. And I would just encourage you, if you see an opportunity for some sort of event in the community where we celebrate all of our teachers and our first responders, all of these people that got us through the last 2 years, let me know how I can help. If it's just stay away because I'm not all that popular right now, I can do that. But whatever it takes, I really think this is an opportunity for us to commend all of those people that do this stuff, not because of the salary, but because they are true members of our community that are contributing in a way that we'll never be able to thank them for adequately. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I think just speaking of our community overall, it has been, I will say that we're speaking of roads. And so this road has not been easy, especially for the past couple of months and leading through it. But even though not everyone has always agreed with the decisions that we make and how we're moving forward, there's been a lot of respect there and trust, I think, and that has meant a lot. And I would also say is that I would certainly not stand here and say, I think we're through the pandemic, because we're not, but I think we're certainly are making some positive headway there, and lots of people are in a much better place and feel like they're in a better place. So certainly appreciate the support from the county level. I can get you back to the first topic you brought up. I can get you some more specifics. That assessment was done, I think maybe 2 years ago when Mr. Harrow was here, but basing what we have now, just looking back at that, we could expect about a $1,500 per month per school savings in those upgrades. I know that has probably changed a little bit, but just to give you that number right now, but I can get you some more specifics.
And it would have been better except for all that cheap solar electricity you guys use over at the schools. So
That's
I understand
exactly
that.
right. That's right.
Dr. Sykes and Ms. Murray, it's always nice to see y'all. It's important that you come more frequently if you're going to deliver checks and help us with our budget. And that was 2 really big items. So thank you very much for that. I do have 2 quick questions on the lighting. I think it was budgeted for $250,000. And was that first for the elementary school? And will that be forthcoming over the next several budget cycles for every school to go to that?
Good question. And so it's in there over a 2-year period. It's a $500,000 ask.
I didn't see that.
1 year for the elementary, 1 year for the middle. Probably if we can move forward with that, we will likely flip flop that, because I think the middle school has more of a need for upgrades. It's not included in the high school, even though it's needed in the high school, because we went with an assumption that proposal would be included with some of the options that we receive for renovation for the high school. So it's needed at all three. Probably the first one it's needed at is the middle school, but that cost is per school.
And I apologize, I must have been writing something down and I just got the tail end of it. You said you were getting a report that was coming to you initially when you first spoke. Is that the report on the potential renovation of the high school? Did I hear that correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. The architects have started to work with us on that. We're expecting that by June, they'll be able to provide a presentation to our school board. We're hoping for at least 3 options of what a renovation would look like.
And I think I heard correctly, March 15th was the first presentation of that information. Is that correct?
It'll be more, it's a community meeting. So we've been
Okay.
working to identify folks in the community and making those phone calls. And so you'll have 2 representatives from the school board where it's more of a, this is the vision of Middlesex County and Middlesex County Public Schools, where they'll go over layout of the building currently, curriculum currently, and then take some ideas and suggestions on what this community would like to see also, facility-wise, curriculum development-wise. They'll break out into some small group time during that first meeting and then kind of go from there and as they design their options for proposals.
Last question I have, as I'm using a pencil going through your budget, you had made mention at the last meeting of a full-time trainer. Does the school system currently have a part-time trainer, but you're looking to extend that to a full-time position?
Correct. We currently have it as a part-time and it's contracted services. So we were unable to find someone who would come to work for us part-time in that capacity. And so we contract with a company. Originally, the contract was for 30 hours, which really kind of met our needs for practices and games, but the company had to cut back just due to their staffing issues. And so we're only getting that person now, I think about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So by the time practices are over or ending, and home games, where our goal is to have that person for some pre-practice activity, conditioning, any of our students that have injuries and things like that, they could work with them, be there for practices, home games, and then potentially away games if we have a need there also.
Thank you both for coming today. It's always nice to see you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you all.
Terrific. Next on the agenda, social services is report only. Unless somebody from social services here? No? Okay. Next then is the health insurance renewal, and we have Mr. David Rowe to do.
Susan or Betty, do you all have my PowerPoint available?
The most recent one was emailed this morning, right?
It was.
Matt, it's in your email. Yeah.
While he's looking for that, can you share with us maybe just a larger perspective on what's going on in health insurance?
Sure
You know,
can.
there've been
Sure.
so many other hot topics in the last 6 months. We
Absolutely.
normally hear a lot about it, but it's just been pushed down by everything else.
Sure will. Chairman Kimbrough, members of the board, I'm David Rowe. I work with the county admin team to help manage our health insurance program. Thank you for the question. This year, we have seen costs go up a bit. And primarily what's driving the increase that you all are going to see today when we present this is candidly prescription drug utilization. We're fortunate because of the program that we're in, and I'll share this again when the slide comes up. We're part of the Commonwealth of Virginia's program, so we buy through the state of Virginia. And the reason we do that is the Commonwealth buys health insurance benefits for about 140,000 employees. We're a group of 50-some, 60-some on plan. We cannot bring that buying power to the table, obviously, that the Commonwealth has. We're a small employer. We have less than 100 employees on our plan. And because of that, we are pool rated. They don't even look at our experience. So they don't look at our medical experience. They don't look at our dental experience. They don't look at our prescription drug experience. What they do is they look at how the overall pool performs, and then we get our share of that. And the only factors that are going to augment any of that are going to be our demographics. Are we older than the pool that we're a part of? Are we younger than the pool? Can't find it, Matt? It's okay. I'll just talk through this. No. Yep. Okay.
I'm sorry, it's from Madeline and Fritz.
Yeah, it's from Matt on my team. Yes. Yes. So, Mr. Kimbrough, when we have the presentation, you're going to see if we continue to do everything as we're doing today, we're looking at about a 10.7% increase. And again, the majority of that was driven by prescription drug utilization. And let me kind of back out. Let me kind of take a 10,000-foot view. I think this is where you're going. Anthem, the team at Anthem comes out to our place every quarter to give us updates on what's going on, what they're seeing, in their world. And pre-COVID, there we go. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, guys. This has probably been pre-COVID. Their prescription drug manager came out.
Sometimes it works.
It's all good. It's all good. Their prescription drug manager came out and shared a list of medications that are in the pipeline that are going to come to market. Some of these medications are truly life-changing for the folks that have these illnesses. The problem is they're very expensive. Some of these medications could be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month. So, that's part of what we're seeing. Because you're a smaller group, you have less than 100 employees, I don't get to see any of your data because candidly, they don't even look at it. They just look at how the pool performs that you're a part of. So this year, for groups your size, and when I say groups your size, these are groups that have between 2 and 99 employees on plan. The average increase was 8.6%. I put this in my presentation. I hope you guys remember. Now, Dr. Seitz brought you a check today. I brought you a decrease last year. So I want to make sure that, we temper that and think about hopefully, what this means in a 2-year average. Let me go ahead and just, what am I doing here, Matt? Let's see. Am I doing this? There we go. Does that kind of answer your question in terms of what's driving healthcare cost? It's prescription drug utilization. That's really the main driver of healthcare cost today.
On our state plan, and just for perspective, I'm curious, the impacts of COVID, we've seen federal government come out and say, your health insurance plan has to cover this and it has to cover that. Just
It
sort of
does.
ramming it down the throats of has that had an impact on a sort of a macro level?
It has for larger groups that we actually see the claims data on. When COVID really hit, kind of the shutdown started really mid-March of 2020, right? So my large self-funded groups where I actually see their paid claims every single week, probably starting in April and May, we saw claims utilization go down because people were afraid to go to the doctor. They were afraid to go to the hospital for elective surgeries. The only folks that were going for care were those that had to. But then what we saw, because the governor reopened us, May 21st or something like that of 2020, then we started to see the utilization go back up. What you're speaking of is we have to pay for COVID testing. We're required to do that when our folks go to have a COVID test. Our plan pays that at 100%. That's going to have an impact on our utilization because those are claims that we typically, we didn't have those claims before. Is it a large factor in our renewal? No, I can't say it's a large factor based on what I can see from larger groups where I do have access to data. Does that help any?
Does. There's just a lot of moving pieces.
There are. Our plan is pretty simplistic, pretty straightforward. So let me flip to the slides and try to walk you all through this. And, you know, I met with your leadership team, Matt, Betty, Anne Marie, 2-3 weeks ago, Betty, and we kind of walked through this and they gave me some guidance on maybe what options we should present to you all today. So we joined the Commonwealth of Virginia's program called the Local Choice December of 2016, maybe December of 2017. I hope you all will remember, I hope your admin team remembers, we've had either no increases in healthcare costs. We did have a decrease last year, but when we have had an increase, it has been a low single-digit increase. So, you know, I've managed the plan long enough for the county to remember when we were with Anthem on a fully insured basis, you know, the last year before we left to join this program, I think we had close to a 20% increase. So that's why we came into the program. We had looked at it every year. It never made sense. That year with a large increase from a fully insured Anthem program, we did pull the trigger and come into the program. So I hope, you know, we keep some perspective there. We did get a 1.2% decrease in our rates last year. So that was some savings for the county. If you look at our program cost, averaging those costs over a 2-year period, that's about a 4.72% increase over 2 years. Talk to folks that work in the private sector. They would love to have increases in the low single digit mean area. Fully insured groups, the small business owners that we have in this community, they're facing probably double-digit increases most every year. We do take advantage, as I said earlier, we do take advantage of the immense buying power of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Commonwealth, if you think about all the VDOT folks, we had a VDOT person here earlier, state police, all of the state workers, plus there are 380 local governments, school divisions. Our school division is in this program, as are all your neighbors. County and schools are in this program. That's 140,000 people that the Commonwealth can leverage when they negotiate with Anthem or with Delta Dental. So it is the best place for you all to be in terms of year over year cost savings for this community and for our employees. I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go through a few spreadsheets that Matt on my team put together. Where am I going with this? Can someone advance for me?
Yes, like I said, sometimes.
There we go. So this is your current analysis of what we're doing today. I know there's a lot on that screen. Let me try to break that down for you if I could. We offer within the program, there are 5 programs, 5 plans that we can offer. We offer the second richest program in the state's portfolio. That's the plan shaded in the pinkish color called Key Advantage 250. The plan that we fund off is the green plan called Key Advantage 500. And we fund that plan today. We fund the employee-only cost. And remember, our medical plan includes dental, vision, prescription drug coverage. So it's an all-in program. We currently fund for our employees that low option plan, the Key Advantage 500 plan, at 100%. So our employees today get medical, dental, vision, pharmacy if they elect that plan, and nothing comes out of their paycheck. You can see, if you can kind of see on there where the enrollment counts are, 52, or the vast majority of our folks, take our free plan. We've got, you can see we have 3 duals that take that plan and 2 families that take that plan. So what we do today is we allow our employees to buy up to the richer plan that's in the pink. And the reason those folks buy up is because of the hospital benefit. Under that pink plan, under the pink shaded plan, anytime you go to the hospital, inpatient, outpatient, emergency room, there's a flat dollar copay. It provides cost certainty, and I would assume that the 15 folks that have signed up for that plan like having that cost certainty. The plan that we sponsor, if you go in the hospital, $500 deductible, Anthem then pays 80%. Our employees pay 20%. So again, they like the cost certainty of the richer plan, and that's why those 15 folks buy up. Here we go. All right, so this is based on just the county continuing to do what you're doing today. We would still fund the single-only cost for our Key Advantage 500 plan, the plan shaded in green. You can see that the annual cost to the employer would go up about $65,000, $64,800. And you can see from a percentage basis, that's about a 10.7% increase. And let me back up a moment if I can. The average increase for groups your size in this program was about 8.6%. It was actually 9.6%, but the Commonwealth pulled a percent for every group in the program out of their reserve fund and gave it back to the member groups this year. With us getting a 10.7% increase, that was originally an 11.7% increase. That just means that our demographics are worse than the pool that we're a part of. It means that we're older than average, and we probably have a higher female count than the average. They looked at that and said, we need to charge Middlesex a little bit more than the average. So that's how we went from an 8.6% increase to a 10.7% increase. Any questions on that? All right, and that's a little bit smaller because I've taken our two plans and split them into four. When I spoke with your admin team a couple of weeks ago, we were trying to figure out what can we do to still offer very comprehensive benefits to our employees, but try to save the county some money this year. So what we did in this option, the plans that we offer today all have what's called comprehensive dental. So think of that as full-blown dental, from your twice yearly checkups to fillings, perio, endo, crowns, bridges, dentures, and even orthodontics. Our plans today offer all of that. There is an option within the program to offer a preventative dental only option. So the medical benefits would be identical to what we offer today. The pharmacy benefits would be the same. The vision benefits would be the same. The only difference in this scenario is that we would fund off of the Key Advantage 500 plan, shaded in green, and we would fund the preventative dental only option. So you can see that takes our increase from about $65,000 down to $50,000. I do want to point this out. Before we moved to the state's program, we used to make our employees pay fully for our dental plan. Betty, you remember that? So I do not think this is a bad option at all. Again, saves us $15,000 roughly. So what would happen? What if I'm that employee that gets a free plan today? I would still get a free plan that's exactly the same as the plan I have today, but it would only have the preventative dental. If I wanted to buy up to the plan that had the comprehensive dental, as you can see on there, that would be the plan on the left shaded in green. It would cost me $17 a month. And again, once taken out pre-tax by payroll, they're going to feel, less than $17 a month. Again, the same scenario on the pink shaded plan, our buy-up plan. You could have the plan with just preventative dental for $65 a month if you are our employee. And then if you wanted to add the comprehensive dental, that would be an $82 buy-up for you if you chose to do that. Any questions on how that would work? Okay. And then the last option that we discussed with your leadership team was funding off of $1,000 deductible plan. That plan, the plan shaded in, I guess that's kind of a, is it purple, fuchsia, maybe? There are only three differences in this plan and the plan that we have today. This plan does include the comprehensive dental. Three differences. The price is less. The deductible goes from $500 to $1,000. And the out-of-pocket maximum goes from $4,000 to $5,000. My memory doesn't work as good as it used to, as well as it used to. But if I remember correctly, when I moved our coverage from, I believe it was Southern Health to Anthem years ago, our base plan had $1,000 deductible. So that's not something that our team has been, unaccustomed to. So again, with this option, we would fund the $1,000 deductible plan. Again, everything else would be the same. The copays when our folks went to the doctor, the prescription drug benefit is identical. The vision benefit is identical. The dental is identical. We would fund off $1,000 deductible plan at $739 a month. That plan would still be free to our employees. And then folks could buy up to the buy-up plan that we have in place today, the exact same plan, and they would pay $102 a month, which is still very reasonable. And that would take that increase from about $65,000 for the county down to almost $33,000. So really almost cut the increase in half. All right, I've talked a lot. I've thrown a lot of numbers around. Anyone have any questions, any input, any thoughts as we try to, figure this out this year?
I don't know if you have the data because you may not have visibility into the plan. In looking at health plans in the corporate environment, one of the things that I've always looked at is how many people actually meet their deductible, because you can pay for a high deductible if nobody ever uses the deductible in the first place, right? And I've seen cases where only 1 out of 100 people ever met the low deductible number. Do you have any insight as to where?
Mr. Kimbrough, that question came to me from your admin team. Unfortunately, because I can't access any of that data for a group with less than 100 participants. So unfortunately, I can't. I will share this. We showed, probably at your urging last year, Mr. Kimbrough, we showed the high deductible plan last year when I was standing before you all. If David were king and I'm not even king at my own house, I'm on one. I've been on one for probably close to 20 years. I have a very nice 5-figure balance in my health savings account. It's absolutely the smartest way to finance your healthcare costs. But when we put that question out to the employees last year, you guys helped me remember, it was shot down overwhelmingly. So I completely understand. It's scary because the high deductible plan that we could offer as part of this program has a $2,800 deductible. That scares people. The way you offset that is the county would take the savings and premium, put that money into the bank account of our employees. That money rolls from year to year. It's smarter than putting money into your 457, 403B. It is the smartest way to save money for the future. If you use that money for qualified medical, dental, vision, or pharmacy expenses, you never pay federal income tax on that money. When you retire, which we're all going to try to do someday, you can pay your Part B Medicare premium with that money. You can pay for your prescription drug benefit, your Part D benefit with that. You can buy your prescription drugs with that money. And when you turn 65 and become Medicare eligible, you can withdraw money. Let's say you want to pay off your house. All you would do is pay ordinary income tax on it, no penalties. So it's a great, very smart way to save money for the future. I'm a big proponent, and Mr. Kimbrough, exactly like you say, I have several clients in the private sector. That's all they offer their employees. They do not offer traditional plans like this. But I will tell you, on the other side of that coin, I do not have a single public sector client public sector client, and I work with close to 30 around the state that has taken on that strategy. That's just the truth. It's the way it is. Any feedback for us and the leadership team about your all's thoughts about, what may be in the best interest of the county, maybe in the best interest of the employees with what I've covered today? I think they're trying to figure out how much money they've budgeted for health
Comments or
insurance.
questions?
Any questions for me, Mr. Kimbrough? If not, I guess I will return to my, yes, Betty. Yeah, the great question. Thank you for reminding me. The Commonwealth is implementing or is trying to implement a new benefit management system called Cardinal. And if any of you all have ever had to work with any aspects of finance with the Commonwealth, that's their system. It's called Cardinal. It has been an utter disaster, to say the least. But we do have to make a decision. I do have to process your renewal no later than March 25th. So I don't know how that works in terms of, Matt, do these folks need to they'll have to vote on what we do? How do you all typically manage that?
We have in the past had them vote on it.
Vote on it. So I don't know when the next opportunity for that is, but again, I do have to have a decision and process this renewal by March 25th this year. It's normally April 1st. We normally can get a 30-day extension automatically. This year we cannot, unfortunately. So that's what, three weeks away?
And our budget did assume that we would continue with the two current options, which was the local Advantage 250 and 500. So those were the two assumptions that our budget included. Now, I didn't quite hit the 10.7% increase, but the difference was negligible between what I did budget for and what's in there. So that is what your budget stands for right now, is status quo. We looked at and we requested the information regarding the preventive dental, if the board were interested in considering any price reductions. But that's all I got.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
What is the difference between the 500 and the 1,000 as far as doctors you go to?
Nothing, no difference. The copays at the doctor are identical. Again, three differences. The price is lower for the $1,000 deductible plan. Your deductible, if you have anything done other than the billing of an office visit, your deductible would go from $500 to $1,000. And then your out-of-pocket maximum, if you had a serious hospital stay, worst case scenario that you would pay for in one plan year, and our plan year runs from July 1st through June 30, would go up $1,000 from $4,000 to $5,000. Other than that, those two plans are identical. Cost, deductible, out-of-pocket maximum. That's the only differences between the plans.
Do you have a better one?
Do I have a better one? Well, we offer a better one as our buy-up option. I can even take you one higher than that. I didn't think that was the direction we were going in,
No, I
but
just, they're high deductible. I've been, saying something about the high deductible all along. So I like to know the benefits. What's the difference between the lower deductible and high deductible? When do you have to pay the difference? So when do you allow a certain
great
amount of-
question. I think I understand exactly what you're asking me. So today with our plans, when you go to your doctor, you pay a flat dollar copay. So it's cost certainty. The employees like that because before they go for their visit, they know exactly what it's going to cost them. Okay. If you go to the doctor, if we went with the high deductible plan, that plan does not have office visit copays for doctors. It does not have copays at the pharmacy. That's all included in your $2,800 deductible. After you meet your $2,800 deductible under the high deductible plan, then it's an 80-20 plan. Anthem would pay 80%. Our employees would pay 20% until they hit a $5,000 out-of-pocket maximum. then Anthem would pay everything, medical and pharmacy, for the balance of our plan year. But, you know, the $2,800 deductible I know is scary to our employees. But again, you know, the way you make that plan work is to take some of the dollars that you're currently sending to Anthem every month when we pay our bill. And candidly, that Anthem's just a stopping point. The state holds all the risk for this program. Anthem provides no insurance. This is an administrative services only plan at the state level. You know, we would take the money we're sending, you know, to either Anthem or the state today, and we would redirect that money into bank accounts for our employees, tax advantaged accounts, so they would have money in their account to offset that $2,800 deductible. That's really the kind of the way these plans work in a nutshell.
So that's no savings to the county because the difference is going into an account for the employee.
You don't have to fund it that way, Betty, but if you don't, then the employees are not going to have any cushion if something were to happen to them. And we don't want to see our employees in that spot.
I just wanted them to
Yeah.
know that.
People love, you know, the idea and the savings on premium of the high deductible plan. But again, to make it really work well, you would really have to take the savings that you didn't send to Anthem and put them into the health savings accounts of our employees. So they would have a cushion.
Have you seen any that put all of that money in a health savings account and they paid the deductible of the numbers of individuals in the insurance out of the health savings account?
Well, I do. I have plenty of clients that, you know, that promote that strategy. I can tell you, for me personally, again, I have a very nice 5-figure account in my health savings account, so that my individual deductible is $3,000. So if something happened to me on the way home, I've got the money in my bank account to pay my deductible.
And then it depends on how it happened on the way home.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's all about the gamble anyway. You know, we gamble on when we got to pay the deductible, because if we go to the doctor's office with a large deductible, we can simply tell them, you know, I got a large deductible, I can't pay it, and they'll reduce it. You know, so if we don't negotiate everywhere we go, we can pay the price to be happy. I mean, if you take a officer of law, for instance, and as long as they're in the car, they're insured, yet you pay the insurance. Why take the low deductible? Because what we're saying, we lay in our bed at night and we, you know, have a heart attack and you got to go to the hospital. That's when you got to pay the deductible. It shouldn't make a whole lot of difference then, because if you can't go, you know, you can't go.
Mr. Williams, you were so wise, because all this is legalized gambling. That's really all it is. You know, the state is gambling that you buy a rich plan and you never use it, right? That's what they're banking on. And our employees buy this, and we buy these products for our employees because we're gambling that something catastrophic would happen and we want them to have protection. That's really as simple as it is. But you're right. Once you go on a high deductible plan and that's your money that's being spent, that's when you call the provider and say, I'm going to go ahead and pay this today. I see where Anthem already discounted at about 50%. If I pay you today, would you knock another 20% off the bill? And guess what? 9 times out of 10, they'll do it. So that tells you already how much more healthcare is costing us than it really should.
Right.
That's really what's going on.
What I was, you know, thinking, if everybody put their health savings account in one big account, you know, like a county got 52 people. I mean, in schools, you put your days so you can get more days off than you have. Not everybody's going to get sick at the same time.
That's right.
And if they do, you know, you got a problem anyway.
Well, Mr. Williams, I say this all the time. You know, when you send money to a third party, I mean, we write our check every month to Anthem, and then that money gets funneled directly to the state. You know, anytime you send your money to someone else, you're never going to be able to get that money back. If you pay yourself, the difference between what you would send, you know, to an insurance company versus what you would pay yourself, then that money's in your bank account. If you need it, you've got money to pay the bill. If you don't need it, that money grows from year to year. It rolls over. It's tax advantaged money. But again, we surveyed the employees last year. I know there are many on the dais that remember that. And that concept was shot down overwhelmingly. when we surveyed the employees. Am I correct, Heather?
I'm purposefully being very silent,
I-
but I would say strongly, yes, that was a strong sentiment of your employees.
So
I was going to say, I have my own.
So David, put a fine point on that. When you offer something like that to a population and the resounding response is thanks, but no thanks, does that basically mean I'm getting pretty used to not paying for healthcare unless I think I'm dying?
No, I don't agree with that, Mr. Coons. Even our high deductible plan would pay for preventative care. So PSA for the men, OBGYN visit for females, young children, in the beginning, they go every, 6 weeks, month, 3 months, 12 months. All the preventative care would be paid for at 100%.
Yeah, when they fresh out of the womb, they go pretty weakly. They go
When
really
they,
free-willing.
but all paid for at 100% by Anthem, by the plan. So no, I wouldn't say that, but I will tell you, my wife is on a high deductible plan with our 2 boys on it in Chesterfield County. She's a school teacher. And she's learned to ask questions. When they prescribe medications, I want a generic because guess what? We're paying for that now. You become just naturally a better healthcare consumer and you start to ask questions. But again, our employees did not like that concept. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, I guess that's, I know you're trying to leave it at that, but I'm trying to get a fine point on it. And I guess do we need to educate them about the market more?
If
I
we
know that's
were-
not necessarily the role of small government, but at the same time, if they're overwhelmingly saying, no, we don't want that, what is that?
Mr. Coons, if we were going to implement a program like that, I would ask Anne Marie and Betty that we would need to have mandatory education sessions. So that means, bringing, and we've basically done that before when we moved from Anthem to this program to make sure they understood. I come in this room and conduct the meetings, we give them multiple opportunities to come in and meet with us. That's a big hurdle with education, no doubt about it. I will tell you, your schools offer the $500 plan, which is our base plan today. They offer the $1,000 plan. It's kind of their low option as a traditional plan. And they also offer the high deductible plan. I don't have the renewal with me, but we have pretty decent participation in that plan. A lot of, younger folks look at that and go, man, why am I going to send money to an insurance company? I'll pretend like I was on that richer plan and take the difference and put it in my bank account instead of theirs. It's a process of education. Anything else for me? Matt, I'm just thinking about a timeline.
Yeah, borrowing any non-decision, then we'll just keep it status quo. If you wanted to change or consider something different, we have, luckily, as of this morning, another work session on the 22nd where a decision could be made after they have a chance to kind of poll people. But if the board doesn't really feel compelled to change anything and status quo is where we are, that's what we've relied on in the budget. And I don't think a vote's needed for that because we're just basically continuing to do what we're already doing. Thanks, David.
Yes, thank you all.
These medical savings accounts are going to grow and grow in popularity. I think I'll speak for myself as county administrator. I want our employees to start asking for them instead of fighting before we, yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Just an observation. Looking at, we've got 72 people that are in these plans. And the vast majority of them are in the single category. And in the Key Advantage 500, which is the one that's completely paid for and includes now comprehensive dental. So the majority of our employee pool is getting, we'll call it a full suite of benefits, including the comprehensive dental. And that's probably why they're there, because they've got a full suite of benefits and it is paid for. Just to summarize the savings, if we had preventive dental instead of comprehensive dental, it saves about $15,000 or $200 per employee per year. If we went to the Key 1000, it would save about $32,000 or $440 per employee per year. I don't feel myself compelled to make any sort of a change because I feel that our employees are in the plans that they're in as a part of their overall benefit program to be covered. I wish that we were able to educate people to the idea of a high deductible plan because I think it would be in their best interest. But myself, I don't see a need to, would anybody like to defer any decision on this and talk about it on the 22nd when we meet again? Are we okay to just leave it alone?
That would give the staff a very short implementation window with David and Matt on any potential change you may want to make.
Mr. Chair, I think the silence we're hearing is basically leave it alone. And if somebody wants to speak up and tell me I'm misinterpreting that, fine. But I think David needs a response really today if possible. And I think we're saying leave it alone. I think.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I feel the status quo, keep it like it is. That's just my personal opinion.
That was my sense. Always want to ask the question. Okay. Then we don't need to take any action, correct?
We have a decision.
Status quo.
Thank you all.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
Drive safely on the way home, David.
Okay. Next up is the airport project update. It's page 60 in your packet, and Jeff Gore is with us remotely, right? Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
And Jeff, let me introduce you. Jeff Gore is our consultant attorney with the airport project. He is joining us remote today because he thought he could ski out west and had an accident and may have broken his leg. But we're happy to have him in any way, shape, or form. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, there's no may about it. I definitely broke my leg and could have been worse, but I'm happy to be able to join you guys remotely. I don't have a long presentation. What I'll do is a very brief update on where things stand with the project. And then I think you have a couple items in your packet to consider that deal with some potential changes to the legal team going forward. And I'll walk through that as well. Stop me anytime if you have questions, or at the end of this, happy to address questions. The high-level update of the Hummel Field realignment and extension project is that it remains on course with state agencies. The DEQ has scheduled the public hearing on the environmental review for March 30th, beginning at 5:30 for a half-hour public information session, and then 6 o'clock for the required public hearing. That environmental review process is really the next and pretty much last administrative hurdle that we need to get through before being able to get the project licensed by the Department of Aviation. So after that public hearing, and by the way, right now we're in the 90-day public comment period. So DEQ is sending the environmental review, which has been finalized in draft form by the county's contractor and their engineer. That has been submitted to Department of Aviation, who submitted it to DEQ, and DEQ has sent that out to all the relevant agencies as a part of this required review process. All that feedback will come back to DEQ, as well as any public comments that are either submitted in writing, by email, or made at the public meeting on March 30th. DEQ will compile all that in their report, which they'll have until May 5th as their deadline under the review schedule to do that report and provide that to the Department of Aviation. Once Aviation has that, They will, at that point, it'll be decision time, whether or not they're ready to issue the project license, or whether there have been any mitigation requirements identified that we need to discuss before the project could get licensed. So that's the process. March 30th is the environmental public hearing in your boardroom. It's not a board meeting, it's a DEQ run meeting. And it will be advertised, and we're working county staff. Well, I need to say Betty and Anne Marie are on top of this project, and so you're in good hands with the staff level. But they're finalizing that public notice that has to be published prior to the public hearing. There are a few other things I've been working with the contractor and the contractor's attorney on, Delcorp, obviously the contractor, having to do with the some real estate matters that are part of the deal. So that's something we're working through as we speak. Those will definitely be resolved in time, prior to any sort of construction commencing. Again, construction can't start until the Department of Aviation gets the environmental report from DEQ and issues the project license. So probably looking at sometime early summer before we'd be in a position to break ground with the department issuing that license. So that's sort of a high level overview of where we are right now on the project. Happy I can stop there and answer questions, or I can move on.
Any questions? No questions?
Okay, great, Mr. Chair. The next item, something we discussed along with Matt last week, and that is we have sort of, the county has a unique opportunity, I think, at this point to bring in an extremely well-experienced attorney to sort of help guide this through fruition. That attorney is Mark Flynn. He's the recent director of the Department of Aviation. He has been a local government attorney for 40 years, and he has worked on airport projects around the state. He's also a licensed pilot, and he knows this field and this project extremely well. I've spoken with Mark, and he is back in private law practice, and he's doing some airport related work. And so what I have discussed, and I believe there are a couple agreements before you for consideration, what I've discussed with you, Mr. Chair, and with Matt, Mr. Walker, that is sort of shifting responsibilities at this point, bringing in Mr. Flynn to sort of help guide this project home while I take a step back, and I would just deal with the State Department of Aviation as needed, because under the state conflict of interest laws, Mark cannot can't represent you before his former employer for a year. That's not most of the work that's left. Most of the work is going to be working with Delcorp, working with the county, getting any real estate issues resolved, site plans, deeds, those kind of things, making sure we get everything in proper form to start construction. If something comes up where you all would need legal counsel to represent the county before the Department of Aviation, I would continue to do that. And so what you had before you is a proposal, one from my firm and one from Mr. Flynn, that outlines how that would work. It would be no increase in cost, so that the cost would stay the same. Mr. Flynn would get the lion's share of the monthly fee, because he'd be doing most of the work at that point. Again, no increase to the cost. The fee through your PPTA agreement is subsidized by the contractor, which is allowed through the Public-Private Transportation Act. So that's part of the agreement. So it's really no cost directly to the county anyway. But to the extent there are legal costs, this proposal would not change them for you. What it would do is bring you in someone who's got even more experience than I do on these projects, and his knowledge really is unparalleled in the Commonwealth on this kind of work. So I think it's a good opportunity for you all to take advantage of Mr. Flynn's expertise before he's got more clients than he wants to deal with in his quasi-retirement state. So that's the long and short of it. Again, I'm happy to answer questions on that as well.
Questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just weigh in real quickly. And Jeff, I said this to you privately, but I want to say it publicly. I could say this project would not be anywhere near as far along as it is without Jeff Gore's guidance and his participation in the project. He has been a lifesaver for this project. The staff would have had no ability to take on this type of level of detail and keep this project moving. And he has done an outstanding job. Very happy to have him and very excited about the opportunity to work with Mr. Flynn. I've known Mr. Flynn for a number of years, and Jeff is spot on. I mean, he knows more about airports in the state of Virginia than just about anybody else. And for him to show an interest in our Hummel field, I think is, it's very flattering and very reassuring that we are in very capable hands for the same amount of money. And that's probably the best news I've had all month. And, but I did want to say, Jeff, I, for one, appreciate, and I know I speak for Betty and Anne Marie when I say this, we appreciate greatly your hard work on this project and your determination and your representation on it. And you're not off the hook because we know your phone number now.
That's right. That's right. Well, I appreciate that. I know it's been slow going and frustrating at times. That's just this process. I mean, the protocols and requirements you're dealing with a public airport facility are pretty arduous, and the state will not rush that. So, the process is what it is. You really have no choice but to go through it. We've been fortunate enough to get it expedited somewhat. You recall last year we sought and received a waiver from the Board of Aviation that allows this project to actually break ground and apply for grant money later. That's pretty unprecedented. So I think that's how important I think the state thinks this project can be. So I'm optimistic going forward with it.
Do we need, the signature requested on these agreements is Matt's. Do we need to,
Authorize me to
Authorize
execute
that.
the agreements. Yes, sir.
can we do it both in a single motion? And I'll entertain a motion to authorize Matt to sign both agreements that you have in the packet. One from Jeff Gore and the engagement with Mark Flynn.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Jesse moved, Mr. Harris second. Have a roll call, please.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Motion carries. Right, next up, Resource International Landfill Update. Bob Hunley and Mike Fiore.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, staff, I'm Bob Hunley, Project Manager at Resource International. And with me today are Mike Fiore and Steve Anstein. Mike is our president and Steve is our coordinator of groundwater monitoring services. And we would like to give you an update on the landfill progress that we've made over the last few years. Our goal has and always and continues to be helping Middlesex County exit post-closure care. That is our goal.
We hope to have that done before we retire, but I've resigned to believe that we probably will be retired before that happens.
So the primary pieces of post-closure care that most landfills deal with are groundwater monitoring and landfill gas. And so as we go through these slides, you will see the trends that we have noted, and these are the 5 elements of the presentation. I'd first like to go through the site improvements that we've been able to make with the help of Matt's team, primarily Mr. Blake. So walking through these site improvements, I'd like to highlight these. NES2R is the name of a monitoring well, and you'll see a picture of it a little bit later on the slideshow, that was replacing a hand-augered well that was here when we took over the engineering. So the hand-augered well was installed very close to the creek at the southern property boundary. NES2R replaced that so that we can get better sampling results at that well. You can imagine a hand-augered well probably has a lot of soil, fine particles that work its way down into the water. When we get that sort of contamination of the water, it's very easy to get a false positive result when we're doing groundwater sampling. Similarly with MW10, and we refer to that as turbidity, that soil that's mixed in with the water. And so similarly with MW10, we redeveloped that. That's basically pumping the water out of that well until we get as much of that silt out of the well as possible so that we can get a more clear sample and one that's more representative of what's actually in the ground. We'll also show you some areas of ponded water that were filled thanks to Mr. Blake and staff. We've taken advantage of the maximum purging time that the regulations offer. They allow you to purge the groundwater from the wells 24 hours before you take the sample. So you can think of that again as allowing that water time to settle so that you're not getting any of that turbidity in your sample. So we've taken advantage of that piece of the regulation. And then the landfill gas extraction well improvements were a result of finding that many of the landfill gas extraction wells seem to be non-productive. We weren't getting much gas. We started sampling those wells. We weren't getting a lot of methane from them. And so we started examining, okay, what is wrong with them? Some of them were very full of water. Some of them had a significant amount of sediment in them. So we'll show you those as well. And then finally, the GP3 investigation probes. GP3 is gas probe 3. And that is a probe that is located on the northern portion of the landfill. And that seems to be where we're getting the majority of our landfill gas problems. And so we started looking around GP3 to see if there was another way we could find a compliance point, perhaps a little further away from GP3 where there was clean readings. We could not. So that caused us to take a look at further options, and we'll go through those as well. And these are pictures of some of those before and after shots. The left-hand side shows you some standing water, some rutted areas through Mr. Blake's help and with some county stockpiles of soil, we were able to fill those, or the county was able to fill those. This represents some of the issues we were finding with the landfill gas extraction system. So these pipes are all each landfill gas extraction wells. And you can see on the left-hand side, that was kind of the status of them when we first started taking a look at things. You've got that settlement occurring around the well itself. You've got water standing in that settled area. That water eventually works its way down around the well pipe. Each of these pipes, you can kind of think of them as straws. They're connected to a vacuum pump, which is then sucking the gas out of the landfill and exhausting it. We first tried to use existing on-site stone material, but then in retrospect, we said, no, we really need to have those areas filled with clay. And so they were able to go out and get some clay to pack around those gas wells to prevent, and the idea is to prevent water from seeping down around the well and filling those wells with water. So talking about groundwater monitoring termination trends, this is a site plan of the landfill. To orient you, the upper left corner is where you enter the site. You've got the maintenance building, I think shaded there in yellow or orange. The green area is your drop-off area, your transfer station and recycling area. And then the blue lines indicate the direction of groundwater. And you can see that they're flowing, the green line shows that they're flowing down to the southern portion of the landfill to the creek. Those three red circled areas around the creek are the surface monitoring points where we sample water in the creek itself. And it should point out that while we've been sampling water in those surface points, we've never had any sort of an exceedance. I'd like to call your attention to the square, the rectangle, red rectangle on the lower right-hand portion. So that is the location of NES 2R, which we talked about earlier. That is primarily your main concern for groundwater monitoring at the site because it's close to the property line and we're still getting constituent sampling exceedances at that point. So that is the primary area that we're concerned with. And now I've got some slides of graphs that show you the trends that we've been seeing in each of the wells and the types of constituents that we're up against. This one is called 11 DCA. And the way these graphs work, the solid line is the groundwater protection standard. That's the line that we're trying to be under. And as you can see here, the sampling at that particular well, MW8, is below that groundwater protection standard. And the dotted line is the trend line. And so each of these graphs will show you what's happening at that well with respect to 11 DCA until we get to a few of the different constituents later. But we're trending in the right direction. We're going down, we're below the GPS in most of these. And again, additional 11 DCA slides for other wells. Then we get to vinyl chloride. So vinyl chloride is a constituent that groundwater, as it's going through its progression of constituent breakdown, vinyl chloride is one of the final constituents that is broken down. And so the fact that you've got vinyl chloride in this well means that it's probably on its last leg in terms of any sort of contamination. It's going down, but it's still above GPS. And again, this is that well, it's in that red rectangle right next to the southern property boundary. And then cadmium is a metal that's in MW3, again, trending downward, but still above the GPS at this point. And mercury, completely below the GPS and trending downward. So the important part of all of this is that we are showing you 3 years worth of trends that are either downward or steady state. And that's an important component as you look to options that you may have in terms of how do you exit post-closure care. Because if you can't get below the GPS, there is another way to exit post-closure care, and that's with the help of a UECA. And the UECA is a uniform environmental covenant that you would place on the landfill. There are certain conditions that you have to meet in order to use a UECA. You have to have, like I said before, 3-year downward trends or steady state trends at all of your groundwater sites, sampling wells. The one sticking point for your site is the fact that you own almost to the creek, but not quite. And so if application of a UECA in this particular case would likely require you to own the other side of the creek as well. And we know that there are other properties involved there, so that is a complicating factor, obviously. But if you were to pursue that, you could terminate groundwater monitoring at a savings of approximately $85,000 a year. So that is one option that's available to you, but we do know that it comes with certain extenuating circumstances. With respect to landfill gas monitoring progress, this particular picture shows you what you currently have at the site in terms of a landfill gas extraction system. The white lines are your header lines that are running up to a couple of blower units in this vicinity. And those are sucking the gas out of the landfill. And again, in the red starred areas, you see GP4 and GP3. Those are the 2 gas probe locations closest to the northern boundary and where we've had landfill gas exceedances over time, primarily at 3, but occasionally at 4 as well. So this is the system that was in place when we got here. Mr. Blake was very helpful in getting the header lines above ground. So what you see now is an above ground version of what was in the ground when we first got here. So we can at least now see when we have a blockage in those lines. We can hear it much easier. What we saw when we started doing the gas investigation is that, just as is the case with most older landfills, the landfill was initially started as a trench landfill. So when you build a trench landfill, you build a trench, you fill it with trash, you build a next trench. And so you have these clay walls or soil walls in between each trench. When we started investigating the landfill gas extraction system, we noticed the boring logs indicated that some of the extraction wells had no trash in their boring log at all. So one particular well, I believe it was in this area here, Matt, that well is completely in soil. So if you can imagine that straw that's sucking the gas out, it's not able to do its job because it's in soil, it's not in trash. We also found, again, I mentioned earlier, wells that were full of water. So we started trying to figure out, okay, why are we getting, and we also, like I mentioned earlier, we tried to do some investigation of the GP3 area by installing hand augers around that area to see if there was another compliance point we could get at the property line that was clean. We found gas over there. So the extraction system obviously is not performing like we would hope. It's not pulling the gas out. It's allowing GP3 to still see gas. And so we started looking at all the boring logs of the different wells. And so this is a complicated slide, but I'll try to simplify it. The top half is basically that picture you were just looking at. The bottom half is a soil profile that runs along the line shown at the top that runs along here. So that soil profile is taking advantage of each of the borings that we had along that line and looking at what sort of soil we were working with. What we found was that the landfill is basically sitting on a massive layer of sand, which is not too surprising given the tidewater geology that we have. What we also noticed was that we had these clogged monitoring wells in the waste. So you see that sediment blockage indicated there on each of extraction well 5 and extraction well 1. So obviously, if they've got a fair amount of sediment in those wells, they're not performing like they should be. So generally, what we think is happening with respect to GP3 is the bubbles there that you see at the top are what our animation is for landfill gas. And so we think this is what's happening. It tries to go up to the cap. It can't get out. It goes down into the path of least resistance, which is the sand. It sees clay to the left. It can't get that way. So it goes to the right and we get it over to GP3. So pretty much that's what we think is happening with respect to the landfill gas we're seeing at GP3. So what do we do about it? We've come up with several different approaches that we think we should consider. We considered nested probes at 5, 10, and 20 feet around GP3 and GP4 as a way to precisely identify where gas was located. We had some other thoughts about that. And so while we think that that's good information, it's probably not an approach that you necessarily need to spend money on. You could take the approach of putting additional extraction wells. I talked about the extraction wells being clogged. You could put additional extraction wells in the landfill itself. They're fairly expensive to install. And the drawback there is if you don't get the gas out with those new extraction wells, you still have a compliance point problem at GP3 and occasionally GP4. Finally, we looked at landfill gas vent trench, which is a fairly common remediation approach at other landfills across the state. But with the depth that you would have to put that vent trench in and the soils that we're dealing with, it would be a very expensive proposition to install 2 of those trenches. And so we definitely thought that was, not worth exploring. The final approach there listed is the landfill gas vent wells. And we think that that's a very practical approach for several reasons. One is that we can put those vent wells near GP3 and near GP4, so they're not in waste necessarily. They don't have the drawbacks of working inside of trash. I've shown them here on this diagram where the red circles are, the red solid circles are around GP3 and GP4. And so that would be the approach we think is probably the best. They would allow gas to vent passively, and they would be screened the entire depth of the vent well. And the other added advantage to those is that if we are able to extract gas and prevent it from getting to GP3 and GP4 by way of those passive vents, we would be in a position to turn off the extraction system, which is what DEQ requires before they will allow you to exit post-closure care with respect to landfill gas. They require that you be landfill gas free at your probes for 3 years without an active extraction system running. So the benefit of these additional vent wells would be to vent the gas and not be part of the active extraction system. If we added additional extraction wells, then again, you'd still be running that system the whole time until you got the gas removed. And the figure on the right represents a typical gas vent detail. And the figure on the left was the approach about the nested probes. So I'll stop here and allow for questions. I've got one other slide, but I think probably the majority of the questions are from this earlier presentation. So be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say, I want to know how many light years from now we're going to post-close this landfill. Because I can tell you, the county closed them early to go through that, and then the state looked like they had a moving target.
Yes, sir.
So they did this, they did that, but and then they said, it still wasn't ready for post-closing. But my question is, now the pipes, why didn't they put cement around? I know you said gravel and the vent pipes, but it looked like to me the gravel water would go down there.
Right.
And now if you cement it and dome it off, if water hit, it won't go down there and contaminate in the bottom.
Yes, sir.
Why they didn't do that?
I'm not sure why why it wasn't done earlier, but by the time we got to it, the materials on site that they had to use initially were the stone, was the stone. And so once we saw that, we said, no, we really don't need the stone around it. We need something that's more impervious. And clay was obviously cheaper than concrete, but you're exactly right. You want something that's impervious around those so that you don't get infiltration. I think the damage in terms of the blockages of those wells had probably already been done by that time. So it's probably a moot point by then, but you're exactly right.
That's all.
Hi, I'm Steve Anstein. I just didn't mean to interrupt, but the boring logs that we had for these extraction wells that we got from Joyce, they did show that there was a bentonite seal, which a bentonite seal acts better than concrete, but that had collapsed over time as the landfill settled and they disappeared. Grass came back over them. So we don't even know where they are on the ground without doing any further investigation. So that's what our solution was, temporary.
Right. That's the same product that they use to close wells and whatnot. Like if you abandon a
That's right.
drinking well, you'll fill them with
Bentonite,
Yeah.
right?
Good.
A slurry.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming today. Very informative presentation.
Thank
So is y'all's, are y'all proponents of the LFG vent wells?
Yes, sir.
Is that what I see from?
Yes, sir.
This presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and just humor me a moment. I'm looking at a slide, graph slide of MW3, arsenic, MW3, and
Cadmium.
cadmium.
It's a metal.
And you had spoke earlier about that it was not putting us in a good position to have those graphs above the ASGPS line. Is that correct?
Right. The GPS, what that solid line is showing you is the groundwater protection standard line. So that is the standard that you want to be below.
I'm with you. Just at a, because I don't know that you commented on it, but pretty big spike on the cadmium line graph, and then a pretty constant above the ASGPS for the
Arsenic.
For the arsenic. Is there a particular reason why those two items seem to be above the graph?
With respect to cadmium, any metal is obviously something that can deteriorate as part of biodegradation in a landfill and work its way into groundwater. And so cadmium and arsenic were both constituents of concern that are part of the groundwater monitoring program. And with respect to the spikes, I think we do see some seasonal variation from time to time. And depending on the type of year we have, if it's a very wet year, sometimes that can have an effect. I know back in 18, I think we had a very significantly wet year. So it's very possible that sometime between 18 and 19, that could have affected it. The more water we have, the potential for more plume migration is caused. So, but the good part about, I think, all of these is after, even with arsenic, we have a steady state trend line for 3 years. It is actually going down slightly, but we would still need that to be below groundwater protection standards if we were going to petition DEQ to get out of groundwater monitoring.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
You mentioned something that got my attention. I think you said that if we owned land that was just across the creek, we would
Yes,
have
sir.
an option for something called Eureka that
Right.
would result in $85,000 a year of savings.
Right. So the groundwater monitoring costs, where we go out, sample water, send it to the lab, get results, put a report together, all of that. We do that twice a year. Those costs typically are somewhere in the neighborhood of $85,000 annually. So, and a large percentage of that is the lab costs that we have to expend for getting those tests. But if we were able to own the southern part of the landfill below the creek, then you could apply this Eureka, this environmental covenant on the property. But DEQ does require that you own the entire area where the groundwater monitoring plume of contamination could be. And so they would want you to own the other bank of the creek. And I had a conversation with the DEQ person in charge of the Eureka program prior to this meeting, and he confirmed that again, that we would have to own at least, I think he said somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 feet of that bank in order to apply for the Eureka.
Is that something we've investigated?
And unfortunately, in your situation, there are multiple landowners on the other side of the creek, not just one. If it was just one, that would be one thing, but there are multiple owners. So you wouldn't be dealing with just one person, you'd be dealing with several to try and gain that 50 feet of ownership.
just to clarify that,
Yes,
the
sir.
goal is 50 feet. And if you got that from one of those owners, that doesn't, like if we acquired one piece and had 50 feet, are we there?
I did ask that to the DEQ representative. He said, well, a certain amount of engineering guidance would go into that because we would have to basically predict where the contamination plume is heading. So you could argue that perhaps you could identify one or two of those properties. I believe there's as many as 4 or 5, Matt. I'm not remembering it perfectly, but I believe there's as many as 4 or 5. But we definitely would be looking at more towards the southeastern end there, right?
And Eureka is groundwater only, or is it also gas, or is it?
It's groundwater only, because what they require you to do is say that you're never going to use the water on that property for drinking water.
But when we're thinking post-closure, we're addressing both gas and groundwater, but in the instance of groundwater, the Eureka option becomes available if we can acquire the right 50-foot.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, I guess I still have questions. We've been monitoring this, and I think the last slide shows that we're coming up to $1 million in expenditures over the last 10 years dealing with this. And I think our experts are here, and they're saying that we have some options in terms of a vent for gas. They've looked at 4 different options. Some of them range up to $500,000, and they've sort of taken that away from us and said that's not the right solution. But I guess my question on the vents is there any guarantee that spending $20,000 and putting in 4 vents gets us out of the gas compliance portion? Would that guarantee us with that money that we're done with that portion?
I'd say there's probably no guarantee, but at the same time, but at the same time, I would say that if we can go back to the slide, Matt, that shows the half of the slide was the top. Keep going. That one right there.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at that particular slide and we are pretty confident that, well, we know for sure that the extraction wells that are installed aren't going deep enough to get into the sand. They stop just before the sand layer. So we don't believe that the gas, even when it wasn't blocked, even when the wells weren't blocked, they probably weren't able to extract enough of the gas to keep it from migrating to GP3. So the fact that we would be putting in a probe that would go adjacent to GP3 and down into the sand would, in our opinion, be much more, we'd have much higher confidence level that we'd be able to reach the gas that's getting to GP3.
So guarantee was the wrong word. Your strategy, though, theoretically has the highest likelihood of anything that you've explored.
Yes, sir.
Of getting us away from having a gas issue that we have to address. In other words, if we put these vents in and they do what we intend them to do, we could get our gas levels to where that's no longer a thing we're monitoring.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if everything goes as planned for $20,000, we're out of the gas monitoring business.
Yes, sir.
On the water side, our options are find the 50-foot we want, potentially purchase it, and go Eureka.
Correct.
And then we're out of the landfill game.
Correct.
If all of that goes as planned, knowing that it might not.
Correct.
Okay. On the gases, you're talking about 2 wells that we want to add at each one 2 vents. Why 2 and not 1 at each of those?
Just, excuse me, just duplicity and conservative approach. That, whenever you're putting something in the ground looking for gas, you are not guaranteed to find it. And so we felt like 2 would be safer than 1.
Yeah. And so when when you put a vent in the ground, do you immediately get results that say this one's working? Or
Great
does it
question.
take time?
Great question. At an active extraction system that we worked in another locality, we had a problem with existing extraction wells that were not getting it done. We came in, put another set of extraction wells right next to them, but deeper, and all the way down to the groundwater level to where we were in sand. And within the next day or two, we saw a result. So yes, I think if you intersect the right lens of soil and get into the sand, it's very quick results in terms of what you're seeing.
So, and I'm trying to understand this like a fifth grader, so
Sure.
bear with me. Would we have the option, and I know we're talking about $5,000 per vent, so this isn't huge dollars, but would we have the opportunity after putting one in to say, mission accomplished, we don't need the second one? Or is it really, once you've rolled trucks, you want both of those, you want to deal both of those hands
The
to
latter.
yourself? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's no opportunity to really save, you're going to put all four in to have your best shot at mitigating the gas.
Yes, sir.
Is there ever a situation where you put these in, you're in compliance, and then turns out these landfills shift and gas comes back?
I'd never say never, but it hasn't occurred at the facilities we've worked. Where we've intersected the gas, it's been an almost immediate reaction.
I guess the narrative I'm trying to encourage here is we've been spending money for a long time.
Yes, sir.
In a post-closure world. And I think everybody here wants to approach closure.
Right.
So it sounds to me like you're making a proposal for $20,000. High likelihood the gas portion of our compliance is addressed finally. Not to say we couldn't, what we've learned over time, this is where we're at.
Right.
I'm okay with that. But for $20,000, we can address the gas. And if we can find 50 foot of land that we can purchase on the southeast, then we could address the groundwater. And if we address those two things, your services go away.
Right. We'd love to work for you in other capacities.
Do any of them make money? No, I mean, to me, that seems pretty straightforward on the gas side. When you're showing arsenic and cadmium, those are heavy metals, no?
Yes, sir.
That's groundwater.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The gases that we're venting is, my understanding, and again, I'm a layperson here. My understanding is we're trying to avoid these gases getting into our environment. Is that not right?
I think that's fair. But at the same time, there are certain amounts that DEQ allows you to vent. And so you would certainly fall in that category. When you get into a much denser populated area, they require you to get air permits for the flares that you operate. We're not in that situation here.
And my understanding is also, I believe, that we're so small with this landfill. This isn't a methane capture
Correct.
opportunity at all.
Not at all.
This is minuscule.
That's exactly right. Yes, sir. Just enough to be a nuisance.
And it is. So are you proposing as our experts that we pursue the 4 vents?
Yes, sir.
To mitigate the gas, and that we pursue another strategy beyond Eureka, or is Eureka the only tool available to us to address groundwater?
There are other opportunities to address groundwater, but we believe the Eureka is probably the quickest savings if you were able to accomplish the property purchase. We know that presents issues. There are opportunities to put in injection wells to try and address certain constituents in groundwater. We looked at that, and you're so close to the creek there that presents other potential pitfalls of doing injection wells there. So that was one of the reasons we shied away from the injection well idea.
So are we at a decision-making point here?
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, the purchase of the land for the Eureka portion of this, is it a requirement from DEQ that it has to be on the opposite side of the water?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
why we have to look at that
Yes, sir.
as opposed to
Because
the front side?
because you're so close to the creek, their analysis is that any contamination that you could possibly have in the landfill would eventually work its way into the creek. And so they're saying, all right, you have to own the portion of the land on the opposite side of the creek so that you own everything that's possibly contaminated.
Okay, being a layman, educate me a little further. Because everything on the opposite end of the creek, I think you'd said one landowner. How does that work with the largeness of the piece of property that we're talking about?
Right. And so that's where we would have to, I think Mr. Kuntz mentioned earlier, how many would we have to purchase? Some engineering judgment would go into exactly where we believe the plume migration direction would be. And so that would dictate which particular parcel would be the ideal piece to purchase.
Okay, to follow up on that, does that put us in a liability situation if whatever time frame you want to pick, later on, an adjacent landowner says, well, wait a minute, I'm contaminated?
Certainly purchasing more would be better.
Okay. Great, thank
Well,
you.
we're in that situation now.
Right.
Well,
Yes,
and
you are.
I think it probably should be stated too, that we're in an imposed situation because DEQ has set the limits really low.
Right.
I need to say that.
Yes.
They kind of moved that bar a little bit on us too, if my memory serves.
That is correct. The groundwater protection
Wayne?
standards
It's
change.
like every time we get
As
close
Mr.
to
Jesse
meeting it,
mentioned
well,
earlier.
let's make it lower.
The groundwater protection standards for metals have changed over time, as well as VOCs. 11 DCA, I believe, changed. And those are always being adjusted by EPA. As they do more and more research on particular constituents, they send out groundwater protection standards. And so they have changed over time and primarily gone down significantly in some cases.
And just, I guess with all due respect to the board, if we do continue any further conversations on property acquisition, I'd recommend a closed session so you can be updated on the negotiations heretofore. Would not put a lot of faith in stock in that option.
Okay.
Or unless Heather's done with easements and she's ready to take on a new challenge. Because I have one for her.
Well, that said,
Right.
There's nothing that they're saying about acquiring land that requires us to procure the entire parcel.
Correct.
It could be that we only need a certain amount that's in proximity to the water,
That is correct.
which normally is the more expensive part, but I guess against the landfill, that may not hold quite the same way as we're used to with waterfront.
Sure.
And I guess I'm just looking at the trend lines and you've put in, linear progression that represents these, but I'm noticing some of these have volatile upswings that we experienced as recently as December that are not in our favor. And I guess I'm noticing that arsenic and cadmium in particular are above the GPS.
Right.
So
Now,
that's the
those are
metals.
those are in MW3. So the good thing about that one is that they are much further away from the receptor, the creek, than NES2R. NES2R was that rectangular red box. MW3 is a little bit further away. But you're right. And it's also closer to the landfill itself.
And maybe that's why Eureka is even an option?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so Eureka is not something they offer to everybody. They say, you guys are really close. If you just had this little parcel or
That's
part
right.
of it, there is
That's
an
exactly
option.
right.
Okay.
And even to go a step further, I believe it's only available to facilities in corrective action.
Yeah, I'd like to think of it, and all kidding aside with DEQ, they've got a lot on their plate these days, and some sites are more of concern than others. And I would like to think the agreements that they consider are the ones that, hey, if y'all could just do this, then we don't have to hassle you because we've got bigger fish to fry and a lot worse areas we've got to concentrate on. And we are a really, really small focal point for them, would be the best way of saying it. So just for the public here tonight, I know you've seen some pretty scary terms like cadmium and mercury and arsenic, but these are very, very, very low minuscule amounts.
Correct.
So is it fair to say there's no public health threat here?
Oh, I think very much so, because we
want to make sure people hear
yes,
that.
because we've been sampling the surface water in the creek at the same times, and we've never had any sort of an exceedance there.
Right.
Any other questions, comments?
I've got one question, not just kind of piggybacking, but extending on what John said. If 2 wells are better than 1, are 3 wells better than 2? Because the mobilization cost of getting them drilled is pretty substantial. If we could drill 6 for 25, is that better?
I think more is always better when it comes to landfill gas.
I guess my question on that, and I'm all about if we can knock one of these down, great, but if we can knock both of them down, that's the goal.
Sure.
Even if we get these vented, we still have the groundwater unaddressed and we still get to work with you folks. I think the goal is to get both addressed, right?
Sure.
And just my way of thinking, if $20,000 can get us out of the gas game, we're halfway there after many years and much expense. But I think we as a board need to maybe have a closed session and look seriously at what options we have to address the groundwater. Does that sound
Happy to
right?
do that, and I'll update the board on previous discussions with the property owners in question.
Okay.
All right, if no other discussion, do we have a motion?
I'll try. I move
You're
that we,
definitely the knowledgeable one here about the motion.
the energy that my people make is not from this, but okay. My motion is that we authorize not to exceed $20,000 for 4 vent wells to address the gases in the most cost-efficient way that our experts have presented us.
Second,
I'll second that.
thank you. A motion by Mr. Coates and second by Mr. Jesse. Roll call, please.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Next up, we have HRSD Jeremiah Burford. We need a 10-minute break after HRSD.
Chairman and Board, I appreciate your time. Matt Walker asked me to give a brief presentation or discussion on the Cook's Corner service area pump station and gravity sewer system that we're looking to put out for advertisement over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Currently, we've had the bid set ready to go for the last 2 weeks, but we ran into some issues with DEQ at this time, working through some of the grant funding availability and requirements for that project. They do not have the the front end attachments available for HRSD to incorporate into the contracts. We're looking at different avenues to be able to put this project out and still have the availability for grant funding for the county. So at this time, we're sitting and waiting. I'm expecting to have some more interest this Thursday from DEQ once they meet with the General Assembly and find out exactly what we need to do to make sure that this project qualifies for the various grants that are available for shovel-ready projects.
Under the Infrastructure Act that's currently out.
Yes.
And if I could add, Jeremiah, the last conversations I've had with the health department and DEQ for water and sewer, I'm still led to believe that they hope to have some answers before the governor's infrastructure financing conference that I've mentioned just about every time I've seen you guys. That's still my indication. I have not heard if they have announced when that is yet, Jeremiah.
I have not heard that either.
I think they're both waiting. So as I hear more about that, I will definitely keep the board informed. As I've recommended before, this is one where we need the chairs of both the Water Authority and the board, and maybe even the EDA, to go down there to make sure we know what we need to do, be in line for some of those Infrastructure Act funds, if at all possible. But in order to make sure this project is eligible for them, we're trying to work very closely with DEQ to say, okay, well, do you have a sense of what your requirements are? And we're still trying to get that sense, I guess.
Yeah, and some of the items are is the standard loan funding that's, or loan requirements that are already there, American Iron Steel, but they're looking at additional restrictions on those purchases. So it would be Buy America is what we're hearing at this time, but there's no guarantee for that. But that's with the Buy America clause, there is a increase in cost depending on the project at hand. So the current estimate for this project is 2.5 million, which is up from about 1.7 million that was drafted up at the initial Class 5 cost estimate that was from 2017, pre any construction material volatility, construction cost increase, and various other items that have caused the inflation over the last 5 years. So just keep that in mind when you see the prices of the bills or bids coming in. We're looking, when we do go take this out to bid, it will be presented to the board for approval. And that we would be looking at the first meeting in May at the earliest at this time, and before we can move forward with this project going into the construction phase.
So if I understand, the engineering is pretty much done, but we're waiting to understand how to conform to the requirements for the infrastructure grant program?
That's correct. And I'm sure that everybody's kind of well versed with, it's a potential for principal forgiveness and other avenues with that grant funding, so.
And just as an update, the board may be aware and may remember, we were already approved under the Clean Water Revolving Loan Act to borrow money for this project. What we're trying to do is get grant money to help pay for it. And I think we've got our approval for topping as well. We reported that out a couple months ago. So
Is this bid style grants or just outright grants?
I'm sorry?
Is it grants you have to bid on for how much you're going to copay, or?
Well, that's one of the things I hope to ascertain a little bit more from the Governor's Infrastructure Finance Conference, or VRA. Are these going to be competitive, or are these going to be shovel? If you have a shovel ready project, I won't use the word entitled to them, but that they're more readily accessible. I honestly think, like everything that funnels through the state, there'll be a competitive process. But I like our chances. And not to disparage Cook's Corner by any stretch of imagination, I think that's still a very qualifying project. But I am really excited about the possibilities of Deltaville qualifying.
Any additional questions?
Comments or questions for Jeremiah?
Thanks, Jeremiah.
All right, thank
Good
you.
to see you.
I think it's important they see you ever so often.
Yep.
Thanks.
Not a problem.
All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break here. It's 5:45. We'll be back at 5:55.
You never read.
I was surprised. I drove down.
It'll never be a cash cow. It'll never be-
This will be money you spend. Most of it is going to be.
Well, but remember, like, to build a sewer, if there was no HRSD, we had to put in this whole thing. Back up. That's not even.
You couldn't.
This is the only way.
Yes, state country.
Yes, Jeff, I just wanted to ask you to hang on because we're going to bring you back in for some of the discussion at the airport, I believe.
The agenda, Bayport Development right away. Pages 90 through 97.
And we did, the chairman's mic is off. I apologize.
Oh, sorry. Can you say that again, Lud, please?
Next on the agenda is the Bayport Development right away. Dave, are you going?
So, Mr. Chairman, this is something Dave Kretz and I'm going to invite Grady Palmer to join us. He's the attorney. As the board will remember, this is regarding the expansion of the old Boy Scouts campground. It's been bought out by same company that owns Bethpage and Grace Point, and they're doing that road expansion project. And as part of that, Grady's going to present to you, and there's a letter in your packet, and there's an updated deed of right-of-way and easement that I gave to you, and Larry has a copy as well, and we'll get that on the website. But the short version is, and I'm gonna let Grady go into a little more detail, is as part of this project, they're expanding the road, and VDOT requires us to be a conduit of that. So basically, the developer gets the right-of-way, conveys it to us, and we immediately, without anyone touching it, give it to VDOT so they can maintain it. I'm joking. We have to hold it for a little bit of a period of time, but that's essentially what Grady's going to go over with you. So with that, I'll let Grady take the spotlight.
Thank you, Heather. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Grady Palmer. My business address is 999 Waterside Drive, City of Norfolk. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I learned more about landfills and health plans than I ever thought I'd.
There we go. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry.
Do I need to start over again? Okay. Okay. So thank you. So this project was approved by the board back in July of 2019. As you may recall, that was a rezoning. There was a proffer that was associated with that rezoning to address some safety issues on Bayport Road. So the client has agreed to widen Bayport Road. Now, with that comes additional right-of-way easements that become necessary to be conveyed to the county and then to VDOT for maintenance. And so, we have gone through the site plan process. We've been through the VDOT road plan process. We're coming down to the final leg of this journey. And so now tonight we have requested that you approve the deed. But I think Heather will agree with me that we would ask you to approve it and accept it, provided lawyers do final reviews of those documents. But I just want to touch on one thing quickly, that the deed that's in front of you tonight is a little different than the one that was in your package that you got before the meeting. And I want to tell you why it's a little different. As we were looking at it, the original deed had what's called temporary construction easements included in it. And what those are is what the contractors need to go out and do the digging and the work and all the sort of associated that goes along with construction contractors and that sort of things, that eventually temporary construction easements disappear. And so you only need them for a little bit amount of time while you're doing them. It was better to do those privately because all this road work will be done privately. County's not involved in the road work. You will then be the conduit for the end product that will end up with VDOT maintenance. And so we thought it was better that we handle those privately. And so we removed those from the deed. So the only thing that is in the deed that is for your review tonight is the right-of-way that expands the roadway, and then what's called a slope easement, where we have to cut in some slopes for stability to stabilize the new roadway. And so that's what's before you tonight. Again, this is the final leg of the journey. We're very excited to start construction on this project. We think it's going to be a premier project, not only in Middlesex County, but we believe on the East Coast. And so with that, I'll stand by for any questions that you have. I ask for your approval tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Grady, if you don't mind staying with this. So I just want to go over a couple of things for the board. Is the liability, how is that? Is this obligating us to develop or build anything?
It is not. So it will be entirely private. So the county will receive what we do, and then VDOT will take over maintenance. So it does not obligate you at all for any construction obligations.
And we've put that in writing too, just so y'all know. So there's just a couple of formatting things that Grady and I are working on. It's not adversarial or anything like that. It's just a formatting, and we want to make sure we want to reference the plat. So it's very technical things that I would ask that the motion, if it's your desire to approve, would be subject to my review. And we'll iron those out in the next day or two, but there's a statute on point that says that you're not incurring liability simply because you're required to accept this right away does not mean that you then have to maintain it or do anything. So not only do Virginia code on our side, but then we also have language in the deed saying that VDOT will be taking over maintenance. And Dave Kretz, your zoning administrator, has been in review of this project, and we're going to have VDOT sign off on the plat as well. So we're covering all of our bases to make sure it's very clear that we're doing this according to VDOT standards, and VDOT will be handling the maintenance. Dave, do you have anything you want to add that you think the board might need to know?
No, just that Is it on? Yes. The only other item, it would be kind of piggybacking on Heather's comments. There was one change to the plat. We are going to add a VDOT signature to that plat. So that motion would have to cover that too. That's the only change in that plat that'll occur versus the one you have in your packet. We all felt it best to get VDOT signature on that plat. So other than that, I have no other comments.
Happy to answer any questions of the board. There are none, so staff is looking to you for a motion to authorize the chairman to sign the deed of right-of-way and easement subject to the county attorney's final approval and subject to VDOT signature being added to the final plat, which is, I've handed to you.
So moved.
And I'll second it.
A motion by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Jesse. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jesse,
Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Coons,
Okay.
Mr. Harris.
Oh, sorry. Do we have any discussions?
No discussion. Go ahead. We start.
I'm still being schooled.
I think my name was called.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
So it's unanimous.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for my continued improvement program, Wayne. Next up is the purchase of Lattimore property. Matt?
Yes, sir. I am seeking authorization for our chairman to sign the necessary documents to close on the Lattimore property, tax map 27-51. And with the board's approval, I will try to demonstrate where the property is located. Of course, tax map 2752A is county-owned property. This is the property that the board had secured over 13, 14 years ago now for a potential wastewater treatment site. It was never developed, and the property is still there. The property that we are asking authorization to purchase is the Dorothy Lattimore Estate property, tax map 2751, which is approximately 5.43 acres for the amount of $95,000. I believe that's what we have it contracted on. The title work is largely complete. There's a couple of nuance issues that our title company is working through. And in your packet is an acceptable plat. We've had Gordon Jones, our consultant surveyor and engineer, review that. And he says that's an acceptable plat, so it's acceptable to me. With that being said, my recommendation for the board is authorize the chairman to sign and close on this property when we have a closing date set.
I have a question. Just for the public knowledge, we're acquiring this piece of property for the advantage of Route 33 access and to give us more access to the property that we already currently own.
That is correct. This is a road view of the Lattimore property. And of course, the 5 acres goes further in to the tract. Our property is further down. If I come down the road a wee little bit. Our property wraps around the old African-American Masonic Lodge, I believe it is.
That's correct.
And this property, the acquisition of this property would give us a considerable amount of more road frontage. We have some road frontage through this area and through this area. Let me go back to the other tax map, probably see that better. Pretty much surrounding the old Masonic Lodge into the property. So the acquisition of tax map 2751 would give us more road frontage and potentially aid the board in perhaps selling a portion or all of the county-owned property out there.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make the motion to empower our county attorney to proceed with the purchase of that property
And authorize the chairman to sign.
And authorize. the
and
chair.
authorize the thank you, and authorize the chairman to sign.
And now I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Kimber.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up is the citizen appointment. Betty?
Okay. You have in your packet an application from Mr. Bev Butler to be reappointed to the Planning Commission for a 4-year term. That his current term actually expires at the end of this month, and he's asked to be reappointed.
And
I don't think that's right. I thought all planning commission terms expired in June.
is this still proper to move ahead with?
No, I'm pretty sure though, all of the planning commission terms expire in June. So if you want to wait. Yeah, this says.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion that we approve Mr. Butler, no matter when the term starts.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're just ahead of the game, right?
Yeah.
Motion by Mr. Coons, second by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? I've just mentioned I served with Mr. Butler on the planning commission when I served on there. He's very diligent. And so I would ask for a roll call, please, Betty.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
And Mr. Kimber.
Aye. Motion approved. Next is airport resolution. Betty, page 102 in the packet.
We have Jeff Gore still with us, Mr. Chairman, by Zoom.
Jeff didn't realize that we had these extra things on there. So, in your packet, part of the ongoing runway expansion project requires that the county apply for a license modification. And a copy of that application is in your packet. On the back side of it, on page 104, there's a listing of all the different documents that are required from the county to be included with this application. Some have already been done. The airport layout plan has already been adopted and that's done. The Department of Aviation also already has the copy of the airport property map with the proposed runway extension. We've also submitted our certificate of financial responsibility. The environmental Determination will be made after the Department of Environmental Quality's public hearing that's going to be held on March the 30th. So about the only things that need to be done still by the board to include with this are an official resolution of the board supporting the runway expansion, and then also submission of this FAA form that notifies them that we are expanding the runway. So I would ask for the board's, there's action requested there to take action to adopt the resolution supporting the runway improvements and authorizing the signature by either the chair or the county administrator, and submitting the application, including that form and any other documents that are required.
Thank you. Any questions?
I got a question, not a question really, but I got something I think should be changed on the layout. The airport layout plan was already approved by the Department of Aviation. However, I would like to make a motion that we amend the plan by removing the opposed terminal building site on the east side of the runway. And to do this also, we have to be approved by the Aviation Department. And it also asks for a reason why. On the blueprint, if you look at 109, you'll see over the other side. And I'll say we're building a runway, we're not building a terminal. And for some reason or another, that terminal got put on this drawing. And it's somewhere near the middle of it. You'll see it in blue. You see it in light blue on the drawing. So I would like to make a motion that we amend that plan by removing the opposed terminal building shown on the east side of the runway from the plan.
If you can scroll that up a little bit, Matt. No, the other way. Whoa, I was just looking at the legend. It's shown in blue as a building. I think that word is ultimate, maybe over there. I can't read that fine print right here. Ultimate. So it's shown maybe as an ultimate improvement. Who knows how many centuries down the road for an improvement at Hummel. I don't think it's even as a solid blue. Come down now. Come back down. It's as a dotted. Yeah, it's as a dotted improvement.
Is this what you want to look at, Betty?
Well, I wanted to look at both. I wanted to
Okay.
see how it was colored and, whether it was a solid line or a dashed line, and then look at the key, the legend.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So with the legend, all of the dotted
That says
things are ultimate.
existing, future,
Right.
and ultimate.
Right. So it's shown on the plan, just as an ultimate, 20, 30 years, who knows? It could be, 10 years down the road, but it's just shown as something out there that could potentially be there. And we can amend this plan. It's a plan, just that, like it says, it shows current conditions, it shows future conditions, like the dark blue for the expansion of the runway. That's the next thing. That's a solid line. And then like the terminal building and these hangars over here, that's showing all, ultimate future hangars over there on the west side. Yeah, the Department of Aviation requires that anytime we do any type of construction or anything like that on the airport, it has to be shown on this plan some way or another. So if we ask them to take it off now, there's a process to do that. We just ask them to amend our plan. We would circle that and give a reason why we want it taken off. And then in the future, if you want to put it back on there, then we would ask to put it back on.
So it sounds like a motion would incorporate modifying the plan to remove the
To remove that
the
ultimate.
eastern
Mhm.
ultimate development.
Yeah, the runway, yeah, on the east side of the runway plan. So
And
you
with-
remove it.
And with that, to authorize myself and Matt to execute the agreement. Is that what the motion would be?
I'm not sure. I mean, at this moment, I'd like to ask if Mr. Gore has anything he'd like to say as well. Is he still with us?
Your guidance?
I am.
Yeah, Jeff's still with us. Jeff, your guidance is needed.
Okay. Mr. Chair, board members. So I frankly haven't been involved in this. I think Betty and staff has been dealing with the department on the underlying resolution. So those are procedural requirements, administrative requirements to show the board support for the project and to notify the FAA and the state of that. What I think I don't have concerns there. I don't know anything about removing a planned structure. I think that's a land use decision. That's up to the board. Certainly, you all can choose to remove it's speculative at this point anyway, I think, as Betty was pointing out. I think if you want to remove that now, you can. That's in the board's discretion. As Betty has said, the plan can be amended. I think it's a matter of what is the implication of your decision today on future development around the project. It's a policy decision. I don't think there's a legal problem with you removing a proposed or potentially planned structure that could be years down the road anyway. It's more of a making sure your eyes are open on that decision. But I do think if things change down the road, the plan can be revised.
So it sounds like, yes, if you want to make a motion to approve an amended resolution removing this, you can do it all in one. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I just got a question on this. So basically, if you're looking at this, it's a future plan, so it's almost like a capital improvement, right? If you think about it, it's something that can be in the future, but that don't mean you're gonna do it right now and then. To me, they look like, it may be some future plan, but that don't mean that plan gonna have to, it's definitely set in stone. And because of the color of the chart. I mean, is that gonna delay anything that's gonna do here? When you gotta do all that, would that delay the process?
I don't believe so. Because I believe amendment of the plan, that can be handled by the staff with the department.
Right.
So I would submit this change first and then submit the amended plan with the resolution that you adopt and the application and everything. We still have time.
Would that be a cleaner way to handle it, you think, Betty?
To do it separately?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah, let's get the plan, get this amended, and then submit it with the package, the license package.
I haven't been very closely following the project, very distantly following the project. I wasn't aware of any county discussion about putting the hangar over on that side. I'm kind of like Reggie. And if it's the board's will to remove that and demonstrate that maybe elsewhere on the plan or not at all, I'm fine with that.
Not at all.
I see where they basically in this plan remove the existing terminal building.
And put hangars.
Yeah, and in deference to more hangars and an access roadway. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn or through my hat on this in any fashion. I don't see there's any reason why we couldn't ask for that to be amended and taken off, if that's the board's desire. We may have to work with the engineer though to do it, correct, Betty?
No.
No, just put a big X through it.
Pretty much.
All right.
And talking, at different meetings I went to, it never should have been on the graph. It might was on in the past, but it looked like almost some kind of way it floats in your eye and somebody got to look at it to see it. Then you'll pass things that near cause the future because you haven't been paid any mind to it. We were paying some attention. We wouldn't have the question, but action is dead in the future of a blueprint that we're looking at. I'm saying that when I found out about it, it was kind of, I thought that it was done. All the words that went on there. When I got the graph and it was brought to my attention that it was on there and not supposed to be on there. I'm just wondering why it's on there. So today I'm coming and say, look, we move it off there. If they want to put something for the near future or whatever, we putting in a runway. We're not building terminals 20 years down the road. Somebody want to do it 20, 25 years down the road to get a permit and go and do it.
So would you like to make that motion that we make this modification to take the terminal off, submit that, and subsequently authorize me and Matt to execute this agreement?
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we amend the plan and removing the opposed terminal building shown on the east side of the runway from the plan and make Lud and Matt the signees off on it.
It only needs to be one, either Matt or.
Well, be Lud. No, be Lud.
Always to the chairman.
Be the chairman. Be Lud. You can get rid of Matt. We can't get rid of you.
That's right. That's right. So let me take the axe, boss. That's why y'all put me in big bucket. But I would like to ask you, just for a point of clarification for the minutes, the terminal or the item you're asking for omission is the ultimate general aviation FBO and FBO parking and related like travel lanes. Is that correct, Reggie?
Was that?
What you're, I just wanted to ask for a little bit of clarification for the minutes. So I know what you mean, but want to make sure it's said properly. What you're asking for the omission of is the ultimate general aviation FBO parking access drive and related aircraft parking, I guess it is.
Are you talking about the
Depicted
aircraft-
use of.
The aircraft apron? The other thing in blue? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
This whole thing here.
This whole thing.
Okay.
Even the one going through wetlands.
Well, I know what you mean. I'm just trying to make sure everybody's clear for the minute.
Well, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Harris. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank
Next
you.
up,
All right, Jeff, thank you for your attendance. I think your duty is fulfilled, sir.
All right, have a good evening.
Break a leg.
That was John Coons.
all right, next up, sports complex fee waiver request. Betty, it's on
Okay.
page 113.
Yeah. On pages 114 and 115, you can see pictures of the 30 by 40 foot pole shed structure that the Sports Complex Committee is wishing to construct. And they have asked for waiving of the fee. Well, they've asked for authorization to do it since the county owns the property, and then have asked for waiving of the fees for a total of $223.20.
There a motion?
I'll make a motion that we waive the fees. For the second.
Motion by Mr. Jesse, second by Mr. Coates. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye. Motion carries. The
Thank you.
dog park roof fee waiver request, Anne Marie on page 117.
Great, thank you. I don't have any cool pictures like Betty did. But back in September, the board approved a contract with River Woodworks to put a roof over the dog shed kennels. He's now got the He's now got the parts for it. He came in to get the application and I realized I had forgotten to request a fee waiver for that particular project. Since it is a county project, I'm asking for a fee waiver. The planning department said that the building fee for the roof would be about $100.80.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we waive the fee for the dog park building.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jesse, second by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kings?
Abstain. There's too many reasons.
Here's me.
Okay.
Abstain.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye. Motion carries. All right, administrator updates, Matt, I'm on page 118.
Mr. Chairman, I am out of words today, so I will defer to my colleague across the way there, Miss Anne Marie.
For the cigarette tax
cigarette-
update, no, that's simply, I'm gonna start putting that report
Just-
in your packet every month, so you can see how the cigarette taxes are flowing. That's a new tax that was implemented back in August this year. So far this year, we've collected 93,000, and that doesn't include the 17,000 that was deposited today. So that's all I had. There's nothing interesting on that.
You smoke.
No. Although it is kind of not to digress, but remember, we do have the next tax that would be things that would be taxable, and that's going to be the marijuana tax that can come up. So.
We have high hopes.
We better get this meeting wrapped up soon. Thank you. And you have a presentation on the Dominion payroll processor?
Not so much a presentation, but a discussion.
Okay.
In January, the county's payroll and benefits administrator moved on to bigger and better things. She's going to work for the sheriff's office. This left our office with a significant void in our operations, but also an opportunity for reorganization and some significant cost savings. With her departure, I researched at least 3, I think there were 4, but I definitely communicated and had conversations with and quotes from 3 different payroll processors. To review I discussed what they provided, how much it would cost. The best of the 3 was called Dominion Payroll. They came back with the lowest cost as well as extremely strong references. They're also a little bit smaller. And the people who I contacted who were their references indicated that was part of their benefit. They said they felt like they were never just a number, that they had somebody to call all the time. The annual cost of using Dominion Payroll would be less than $5,000. Cost is, and I say that cost is based on the number of employees processed. So it actually depends every month. And as you heard earlier today, the treasurer and I have discussed this, and I think her concerns, I've tried to address that. Her concerns were the workload that would increase down in the treasurer's office. But what we've done to mitigate that is everyone who's done this, they get a CSV file from Dominion, and we simply press the 2 or 3 buttons in our Bright system, and it uploads there is no data entry. It uploads from the CSV file. We find that to be much more efficient than trying to do a data entry, which could cause transposing errors. And that's what the agencies with whom I talked, they were the ones that said that that's how they do it. They do it via a CSV upload. Outsourcing payroll processing certainly presents an opportunity to reorganize our administrative offices. I've already started that. Some of the duties that Diane was doing, we've allocated either to me or to Shanae. So we're real excited that hopefully with this next budget and with approval, we can't ask for approval because this is under y'all's, but with the consent to go ahead with this, that we'll be able to not replace that position, thus saving about $38,000 in next year's budget. So that's kind of the excitement part of implementing something that's new and innovative. In addition to providing a higher level of service, it should be I should probably get some of my words. It's going to be time savings, cost reduction, avoid IRS mistakes and penalties. There'll be a team of experts backing me up. And payroll, most importantly, is no longer stuck on one individual, which means that somebody can actually take a vacation on the 7th of the month or whenever we run payroll. So that's the extent. I did not have a presentation. I just wanted to let you know that this is where I'm headed and make sure that if I'm headed, because sometimes I will head in a direction, if I'm not headed in a direction you like, I certainly need to stop before I go any further. That's all I have.
Thank you.
And just to supplement with a few words of what Emery just said, we realized there are going to be some additional duties, as she said, that are going to be transferred to her and our accounts payable clerk. We're recognizing those extra duties with a small supplemental increase in pay and still save a tremendous amount on the costs
Not to me.
of the program.
Not to me.
So with that being said, this is kind of trying to do more with less and thinking about a more modern approach to how we handle some things. I will say there's probably going to be some concern expressed because change is a little unsettling. And when you, as we know from health insurance, when we deal with pay issues, we need to be very careful and sensitive how we move forward. So we thought it would be more than appropriate to vet this with the board. I think we've had some discussions on this individually, but as a whole, make sure you hear what the plan is. And if there is any concern, we address those concerns.
I think it makes sense. You and I talked about it a little bit. I talked to it with Anne Marie. I'm just a little, I guess I need some clarification. Where did the disconnect come from Tracy speaking this morning?
They have never performed a CSV upload and weren't aware that it's part of our software. I did have to go to BAI to have them show me. You may have to help me here, but you type in the letters.
And BAI is bright.
Right. You have to type in the words go GL20 and then go GL25 or something like that. So you actually have to type in words to get to that menu to upload it. But Bright was telling me, because I did talk with Bright, and they were telling me how to do it. So
it would just upload that data file right into our general ledger. Right?
That is correct.
So just insufficient information from their part in coming and speaking today. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's correct. Well, we've only discussed it with her once, and I didn't realize that was still a concern. So, and I think she probably didn't realize it was on the agenda. So, and her not being available today, we weren't able to talk about it. So yeah, we are definitely very confident that this. Now, will this cause her more efforts? It could, but it certainly won't be to. My biggest concern is we have 7 checks we have to write. Every month, there's still 7 people who are not on direct deposit. If we're all direct deposit, it would be really easy. But because there, I think 7 people who still get checks, that's where she's got to come in and do the manual signing of checks. So I think that's going to be a process that we'll work through.
I also would like to say Kathy gave me a call yesterday about the process. And when she called me, I said, well, just present it to the board, let them know what's all going on. And because she was telling me about another county that did this and they had to change back and because of all the stuff going on. But it's always, I told them there's always an example of why it did. And I would just like to know why it happened because somebody had did something that they're wrong or didn't want change. So I just told her to come by and speak to the board. So that's how that came about. I'm just letting you know.
Change is hard. I won't disagree with you. And when you're looking at a change, you question yourself all the time. Did I do it right? Did I miss something? And if we are going to work with each other. We've got a team of people working to make sure we got this right. And if we don't get it right, who'll be the first person to admit it? That will be me. And I'll say, let's go back to the old way. Or hopefully it'll be by the time we've got the replacement system and we'll have a much faster, more efficient program. So part of it is having an older, efficient program that we're working off of right now, that nobody is trained. Let me rephrase that. When I came on board, Matt instructed me to learn how to process payroll right.
That was kind of important.
Yes. He
If
said,
anything
because
happened to our one person,
Yep.
we would be struggling. We'd have to call Bright to come in and do our payroll.
Right. So I did one payroll with Diane. And my first thought, and that was when I first started contacting people, I thought there is no way this can be a regular process. It was so cumbersome and so archaic. And for Diane, this is what she's been doing. So it was she's very good at it. I don't want to disrespect her at all. She's extremely good at it. But having been in other software programs, I knew that it was cumbersome. Yeah, it was very cumbersome. So do I want to bring somebody in, hire somebody at $40,000 a year to come in, learn this project when in 6 months, 8 months, a year, we have a new software anyway? I don't think it's the best use of our time and energy for all of us to manage it and potentially all those risks that I told you, IRS, legal. What I like about Dominion is I believe they can also help me improve some of our payroll processes by even making some of what I'm doing now more efficient, whether it's saying you guys use this form. If you had everybody submit it on an Excel spreadsheet, you could upload it automatically or whatever. So I'm hoping no, let me rephrase that. They have told me they can improve our efficiencies with that. So I'm open to those suggestions as well. Having a professional guide us is going to be a great intermediary step.
And I'll just go ahead and chime in this one last point. I'm not wanting to push for this in any way, shape, or form immediately, but one of the things our lower paid employees have asked time and time again is consideration of going to a bi-monthly payroll as opposed to monthly payroll. It is a bit of an adjustment getting paid once a month, but once you get used to it, it's usually fine. I'm not pushing for anything like that anytime soon, but I would think with the implementation, the successful implementation of Dominion Payroll, we may be able to move to something like that because it's so much more automated. And I think that would benefit some of our lower paid employees that really struggle between paychecks. Speaking for myself, I've got a kid in college, and while I'm not a lower paid employee, yeah, these dates get tight because you're paying college rent and you don't want your daughter kicked out on the street. So just a little anecdotal bit of evidence there.
I can just say you are correct. It would be much easier when this is outsourced and somebody else is running your payroll.
I can't remember if I mentioned this to you or not. The company that I work for, Fahrenheit Advisors, we've been using Dominion ever since the company was founded, and I've been there for over 5 years. They have been fabulous at addressing our particular needs and requests and tweaking things, but also making sure that as all of the payroll regulations change, all the filing requirements change, we don't have to worry about it. It's worked really well, and they will work with you to solve problems and make your life easier.
I'm looking forward to making my life easier.
Yeah.
I guess that's
You're on the right page, do more with less.
That's right. Good examples here.
Because you can have rejections regardless of what you do. I know back in the early mid-70s at work, they had the Mazerex computers put in, and you had, some of the operators didn't want to use them. It don't work. It's not gonna use them. I'm sitting there sleeping all night. I said, you got to learn how to accept things, and these things like I'm glad you stepping in and changing things, because some things need to be changed. And we stick to it, believe in each other, and work as a team. We can accomplish a lot of things. Disagree to agree. Walk away, you're still smiling, and then fight for another day.
And if it don't work, you can always blame us and fire us.
No, you'll blame nobody.
So it sounds like we've got a consensus here. Is that all you need?
yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going off some crazy
Am I
train.
right? We got a consensus?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Heather, you're
Yes, I'm gonna be
you're
short.
almost 2 hours late.
Short and to the point. You got some lovely reading materials handed out to you. Susan put on there your Virginia County Supervisor's Manual. It's been updated. I call this like the little mini BOS Bible. When I first started, this is one of the first books I would review on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. If I may stress, the laws have, they're always changing. And this is just a great primer on a variety of things. And so I just encourage everyone, I have a copy myself, and it's constantly dog-eared. And so that's just my plug, that this is a great tool, and I highly encourage you to use it as a paperweight, but one that you also read too. And that is all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any unfinished business?
Yeah, just a brief update. Mill Creek, I didn't get down there today at lunchtime, but Emerald, I forget the name of them, Renewables Emerald, the guy that's planting the sprigs and rejiggering the sand fence to try to encourage the dune, he was there today. So that project should be closed out. There's no guarantee that it'll keep sand out of the Mill Creek boat ramp, but that is the intent. And I look forward to updating you in coming months if that's actually being successful. And also I met with Louis Lawrence as a new member of the Public Access Authority of the Middle Peninsula. And we have secured funding for at least, I think, 55% of the engineering cost for a long-term solution there. And the Public Access Authority is a space to watch. Louis and the Planning District Commission and the region have done a lot to put Middlesex and the Middle Peninsula on the map in terms of innovations in dealing with land subsidence and global warming and rising waters. So just a really fascinating space, and I'm happy to have been chosen to be on that authority. And I look forward to updating you with more improvements that we make as a community there.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Any new business? I've got, let's see, we'll open for public comments and have that. Now I'll open the floor for public comment. Oh, I did, sorry. Can I do that after public comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I look to Wayne. Wayne's my guru. Would anybody in the public like to address the board? I'll close the public comment section. All right, matters presented by the board. Wayne?
Only thing I know, I will have Oyster Festival Foundation. I will have an Oyster Festival Foundation meeting Thursday. I didn't make those other meetings that I had. I was tied up, but that's all I had.
Okay. Don?
I'm good, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, as I continue to embrace history, coming out of the monument situation, one of the things that I've been thinking about is where were we as a community in 1910? Obviously, I don't think any of us were alive, but I've been reading history books and I've been really trying to understand what Middlesex might have looked like in 1910. And in asking myself, where were we? What were we thinking in 1910? I came across this article by Becky Little, writing for thehistory.com. So think of this in the perspective of 1910. Like, what do we know about 1910? Well, ironically, I'm going to start in 1935. In 1935, Nazi Germany passed two radically discriminatory pieces of legislation, the Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor. Together, these were known as the Nuremberg Laws, and they laid the legal groundwork for the persecution of Jewish people during the Holocaust and World War II. Now, before your eyes glaze over, I'm going somewhere with this. When the Nazis set out to legally disenfranchise and discriminate against Jewish citizens in 1935, they weren't just coming up with ideas out of thin air. They closely studied the laws of another country. According to James Q. Whitman, author of Hitler's American Model, that country was the United States of America. America in the early 20th century was the leading racist jurisdiction in the world, says Whitman, who is a professor at Yale Law School. Nazi lawyers, as a result, were interested in, looked very closely at, and were ultimately influenced by American race law. In particular, Nazis admired the Jim Crow era laws that discriminated against Black Americans and segregated them from white Americans, and they debated whether to introduce similar segregation in Germany. Yet they ultimately decided that it wouldn't go far enough. One of the most striking Nazi views was that Jim Crow was a suitable racist program in the United States because American Blacks were already oppressed and poor. But then in Germany, by contrast, where the Jews, as the Nazis imagined it, were rich and powerful, it was necessary to make more severe measures. Because of this, Nazis were more interested in how the US had designated Native Americans, Filipinos, and other groups as non-citizens, even though they lived in the US or its territories. These models influenced the citizenship portion of the Nuremberg laws, which stripped Jewish Germans of their citizenship and classified them as nationals. But a component of the Jim Crow era that Nazis did think they could translate into Germany were anti-miscegenation laws, which prohibited interracial marriages in 30 of 48 states at the time. America had, by a wide margin, the harshest law of this kind. In particular, some of the states threatened severe criminal punishment for interracial marriage. That was something radical Nazis were very eager to do in Germany as well. The idea of banning Jewish and Aryan marriages presented the Nazis with a dilemma. How would they tell who was Jewish and who was not? After all, race and ethnic categories are socially constructed, and interracial relationships produce offspring who don't fall neatly into one box. Again, the Nazis looked to America. Connected with these anti-miscegenation laws was a great deal of American jurisprudence on how to classify who belonged to which race. Controversial one-drop rules stipulated that anyone with any Black ancestry was legally Black and could not marry a white person. Laws also defined what made a person Asian or Native American in order to prevent these groups from marrying whites. Notably, Virginia had a Pocahontas exception for prominent white families who claimed to be descendants from Pocahontas. American radical classification law was much harsher than anything the Nazis themselves were willing to introduce in Germany. It should come as no surprise then that the Nazis weren't uniformly condemned in the United States before the country entered the war. In the early 1930s, American eugenicists welcomed Nazi ideas about racial purity and republished their propaganda. American aviator Charles Lindbergh accepted a swastika medal from the Nazi Party in 1938. Once the United States entered the war, it took a decidedly anti-Nazi stance, but Black American troops noticed the similarities between the two countries and confronted them head-on with the Double V campaign. Its goal, victory abroad against the Axis powers and a victory at home against Jim Crow. So that was really interesting perspective to me to think that in 1910 and even 20 some years later, the Nazis were looking at American laws on the books to determine how to separate people. And that is the backdrop of what we were making decisions about in 1910 through 1930 in the United States. That's it for me.
Reggie?
Well, first, I would like to apologize for the church of visitation Saturday when I was at the dedication of the building, and I had to leave early, go to my wife's funeral. I mean, my wife's aunt's funeral. And the second thing is that they have started on the parking lot down in Whiting's Creek, and also Louis Lawrence is going to be working on trying to do something with that rampway. So on the Middle Peninsula once again. And another thing, the Homeowners Association for Hairless Pond. Now, when I met with them on a Sunday, and Wayne went down and we met with them, and I advised them and asked them check with Louis Long, because Louis Long probably can get some money through the state by us pooling all together. And I sad to know, as of the day, nobody contact him. So the county and the things that we do through different organizations here to help us, and we pay for that service, and we should be using that service. So Homeowners Association, I appreciate if something I can do, but the sources that we give you, we will, hopefully you will use them to help your own self out, and hopefully you're listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. Just report, we had our first meeting of the Historic Courthouse Committee. It was a great meeting. We've got really wonderful participants. One outcome is the initial step we want to take is to find how courthouses have dealt with this situation in other parts of the country. And one person who actually works at the Middlesex Museum has already distributed examples of 8 courthouses that have such exhibits. It's just a place for us to start. We expect that we're going to need to engage further research work. For that purpose, I would like to request potential access to the remaining discretionary fund in the Board of Supervisors account, which I think is $3,000 or $4,000, just to be available in the event that we need that for research between now and the end of the fiscal year. And as we discussed this morning, we have allocated $10,000 in the supervisor's budget next year to potentially fund the needs of this committee. Matt, is that about right for the rest of this year?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. This year, we had budgeted 6,000 for miscellaneous on the Board of Supervisors. Actual amount spent to date is 2,900. So there's approximately 3,000, just over 3,000 left in this year's. And then next year, we had budgeted 16,000 for miscellaneous lineup.
Great, thank you. And this is just going to be drawn if we need it to do the research that we need. The museum doesn't have excess funds available to provide from their funding, so that's very helpful. Is a consensus okay for that allocation of funds? Everybody on board?
I think a motion you need for an allocation.
Great.
I mean, it's miscellaneous as long as.
If there's debate on it, I'd be happy to make a motion just so that we're above board.
Just go ahead and make a motion. Thank you.
Yeah, I would move that we make the remaining funds from the Board of Supervisors line item available to the Courthouse Historical Committee for their needs in the near future.
Seconded.
Motion by Mr. Koontz, second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Betty.
Mr. Harris,
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coon.
Aye.
and Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye. Thank you. Last order of business, schedule for our next budget work session. We had to move the time a little bit from our discussion earlier today. The next session will be Tuesday, March 22nd at 5 p.m. There being
a calendar invite?
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
ask the calendar. Yep. Or then the previous.
When's that gonna be?
22nd at 5.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
motion by Mr. Jesse, second by Mr. Harris. Any discussion?
Just real quickly, is there any reason we're still doing roll call? Was that COVID related, or why do we have to do roll call? Because when I first started, we didn't.
Yeah, well, I do know that just because other counties do it too, a lot of other counties do the roll call. Okay. So I think protocol, it wouldn't be hard.
We do have the option for one of us to be remote, in which case we would have to have roll call. So I
So
don't,
just keep it there.
we just keep it.
Fair enough. I was just curious.
It just,
Betty,
it
can we
smooths the
adjourn?
minutes.
Roll call?
Somebody make a second on that?
Yes, John did.
Third.
We are at Mr. Williams, Mr. Jesse,
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Harris.
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Hi, thank you all for, yeah.